morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to get started with our session today. We have a full agenda, so we're going to get started right away. So we're going to open the meeting with a reflection from Ms. Mnet Kasai, a junior from Richard Montgomery High School.
Hi, everyone. Okay, I guess I'll start.
Everybody can stand as they're able.
I can't wait for the day that I am truly confident in my work, the day that my accomplishments are considered just as valid as my white counterparts, and that my race wasn't the thing that got me there. Hi, everyone. My name is Mnet Kasai, and I've been in the RM IB Magnet program since my freshman year. I wrote this based on my personal experience. I'd like to start off by reminding everyone that my skin color doesn't have a second brain. My blackness doesn't come with a higher GPA or a better SAT score. It doesn't come with automatic entry into IB at Richard Montgomery or really any Ivy League university. Maybe you all missed that before, but now you know, so please stop telling me. The only reason I am doing as well as I am is because I am black and not because of my ability. I think it's safe to say that every excelling black student has received treatment just like that at least once in their life, most more than that. It's appalling, really, considering racial diversity isn't justification to consider race for public school admission as established by our Supreme Court. And it's appalling, really, because the rates of African Americans at our highest achieving universities only rose above 10% recently. And it's appalling, really, because I had as high of a GPA as many going into my freshman magnet cohort as many, and still maintain that. So to every student or person who's made the comment, you're here because you're black, or it'll be easier for you because you're black, or don't worry, you'll be fine, you'll get in because you're black, I'm not sure I understand. Is my work not as valuable as yours because I'm black? I don't think you know the gravity of your words or understand the doubt that sits inside my brain and goes unheard because of what just left your mouth. Its effect is simply absurd, because even if I know how I got there, your failure to realize that falters my confidence. So to every excelling African American student, to every high achieving minority student that's ever heard those words, don't let them cause you to doubt yourself. There will be a day when that won't even be a concern, and hard work will be hard work, not skin color. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kasai. This is a great way to start our work today. So now we do have some presentations. First, there's a proclamation recognizing National Public Health Week by Councilmember Albornoz and County Executive Elridge.
Good morning. Good morning. Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, good morning, everybody. If folks could step forward from our Department of Health and Human Services and our minority health initiatives, and anybody here to acknowledge this important day. Hey. How are you? Great. Great. Well, good morning, everybody. It is such a privilege and honor to be with all of you this morning. My name is Gabe Albornoz, one of the new members of the County Council and chair of our county's Health and Human Services Committee. And this is actually my first proclamation, so it's kind of an exciting day for me personally. And what a great way to start to acknowledge Public Health Week. This is such a critical component of what we do as a government and what we need to provide as a community. We can be proud of the fact that Montgomery County, for the 6th year in a row, was acknowledged as the healthiest county in the state of Maryland, but we also acknowledge that there is a lot of work left to do. We have incredibly vulnerable populations across our entire county, and public health doesn't just mean physical health, it also means mental health. It also means ensuring that our public environment is safe for our residents to be able to grow old and to be able to grow up. And so it is an honor and privilege as a county council to acknowledge this important day, and our county executive, I know, is also extraordinarily committed to this work. I'd now like to invite Dr. Travis Gales, our public health officer, to say a few words, and then we have a proclamation.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Councilmember Albanos, for sponsoring the proclamation and continuing to support the efforts of public health. This is National Public Health Week. We're excited about it. We have a whole host of exciting opportunities and events planned over the week. We have set out to create the world's largest health fair, and by virtue of the fact that there is no current record, we have the world's largest health fair, and we will work to make sure that it's bigger and better next year. We have over 100 events sponsored by 50 to 60 different organizations, some of which are represented by individuals standing with us today. So thank you all for your contributions to our health fair, and thank you to those who aren't here. We know that public health is important because we need to, even though we do celebrate being the healthiest county in Maryland and one of the healthiest across the county, we still have a lot of work to do because we want to make sure that everyone gets to enjoy those great average outcomes that are above the state and outperform the nation. And just a point of personal privilege, I want to say to the young lady, Ms. Kasai, thank you for your words and reflection. I was in your seat some 20 years ago, but the sad reality is, even as a professional climbing the ladder, many of the things that you encounter, we still have to deal with. So keep fighting, stay encouraged, and make sure that your peers understand to persevere. It does get better, and it does get a little bit different, so keep fighting. So with that in mind, happy National Public Health Week. Thank you to all the contributors, and thank you for the proclamation.
Absolutely. I know our county executive wanted to be here this morning to share in this joint proclamation. I do want to acknowledge the rumors are true. He has a treadmill in his office, and so he is very committed to public health. All right, so we're going to go ahead and read this proclamation, and says, Proclamation of Montgomery County, Maryland, whereas the week of April 1st through 7th, 2019 is recognized as National Public Health Week, and Montgomery County joins in the national theme of creating the healthiest nation for science, for action, for health. And whereas Montgomery County, through the Department of Health and Human Services and Healthy Montgomery, in sponsorship of National Public Health Week, has created an opportunity for week-long emphasis on health, and over 50 organizations throughout Montgomery County will be hosting over 100 health events, and including, but not limited to, health screenings, display tables, seminars, cooking demonstrations, exercise classes, and whereas Montgomery County has been ranked for the 6th year in a row as the healthiest county in the state, yet significant disparities continue to exist in health status, observed in rates of infectious diseases, maternal infant health, obesity, mental health, drug use, and injury. And whereas public health professionals, in partnership with government and a range of stakeholders, help communities prepare for, withstand, and recover from the impact of a full range of health threats. And now, therefore, do we, Mark Elrich as County Executive, Nancy Navarro as County Council President, and Gabe Albornoz as County Council Member, do hereby proclaim the week of April 1st through 7th, 2019 as National Public Health Week, signed the 2nd day of April in the year 2019. Congratulations, and I hope it's a great week. Let's go ahead and take a picture. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So our second proclamation recognizes Child Abuse Prevention Month by Councilmember Vice President Katz.
I'd like to invite the county executive to please join us as he's coming down. I'd like to invite the following people from Treehouse Child Assessment Center to join us, please. You. Good. Tom Grazio, the Treehouse Director, Jenna Calton, Treehouse Psychologist, Nina Bletcher, the Treehouse Director of Community Partnerships, Will Schlossenberg, the Treehouse Community Engagement Consultant. As soon as they found out that there was cookies involved, he decided he was going to come here. Laura Casanas, the Administrative Assistant, Lisa Merkin, who's the Administrator from Child Welfare Services for DHHS, Nicole Jenkins, the board president, Callie Tamarkin, who's the board member, Joyce Gardner, board member, and Lego, the therapy dog, knew to come down immediately. So if we could please have you join us, please. Do you want me to go first? Or? Yeah. Today we recognize April as Child Abuse Prevention Month and the important work of the Treehouse Child Advocacy Center. Child abuse can have a long-term psychological, emotional, and physical effects that can and have lifelong consequences for victims. The Treehouse Child Advocacy Center is dedicated to reducing trauma and promoting healing for child victims of physical abuse, sexual abuse, and neglect. It was established in 2002 and more recently incorporated as a private, nonprofit. The organization partners with the Department of Health and Human Services to provide free medical, forensic, and advocacy services, as well as mental health therapy in a safe, child-friendly environment. In FY18, the Treehouse served 695 new clients and 89 ongoing clients. The Treehouse is where hope steps into the lives of children who have been sexually and physically abused. There's the Torta Cookie, and I invite all my colleagues in the whole county to get involved in the annual Treehouse Torta Cookie, a fun, non-competitive annual family event. The purpose is to raise awareness of the services provided by the Treehouse and child abuse prevention. Takes place on May 4th from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. on the Johns Hopkins University Montgomery County campus. The riders choose between 4 routes: stopping to pick up cookies, which is an enticement here, stopping to pick up cookies at stands along the way. There are also options for small kids and non-bikers and a family expo with live entertainment, exhibitors, and food. There are many ways to support and participate in the sweet event, and we hope everyone listening will do so. I know the person standing next to me loves cookies. Did you have something to say, please?
I think the cookies go against the public health. So we have conflicting things going on here. Look, this is some of the this is some of the most important work that anybody can do in the community. I was a school teacher. As a teacher, you see the effects of child abuse when kids come to the school and they struggle with issues from the home. It is absolutely a life changer for people to be affected by child abuse. It's something that you just don't erase. It's not something you grow out of like acne. It's permanent, and it often affects the children of the children who are affected by child abuse, because that's something that parents often take with them and gets visited on their children. So we know this is not a one-generational problem. It can easily become a multi-generational problem. So the work the Treehouse does and everybody else does in this county to keep our children safe and provide them with support is just absolutely critical for their well-being, but also to actually stop the cycle of child abuse. It has to. You're not just helping one person, but you're breaking a cycle. And I think that's really important, and I'm really glad you're doing this proclamation, and I'm happy to be here with you this morning.
We're happy to have you. Did anyone have something to add, or did you want to speak? Please, no? Yes, please, absolutely.
Be careful what you ask for.
Yeah.
I would like to say just a few things. As director of the Treehouse, it's been an absolute privilege to work in this county, where we have tremendous support from folks like Councilman Katz and many other council persons, as well as the county exec's office. The Treehouse is dedicated to the mission that we do. I am surrounded by our board members and by our staff, and everything that we do on behalf of these kids is done because we want to do it. We're benefiting from the leadership from the Child Welfare Department, and we're doing the work every single day. But 1 month a year we come forward to raise awareness and to ask for your help. So cookies in moderation are good, despite what the public health people tell you. And riding a bike is good, healthy exercise. So please join us on May 4th. And thank you all for your ongoing support.
Thank you. You want to start? Go ahead.
Take turns?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Proclamation of Montgomery County, Maryland, whereas in Montgomery County, every child should be allowed to thrive, to have every chance at happiness and every chance at success, but tragically too many children suffer because of abuse or neglect. And
Whereas last year in Montgomery County, the Child Welfare Services the screening line received over 18,000 calls regarding possible allegations of abuse and neglect and investigated over 2,600 of these reports. And whereas
the Treehouse staff works closely with Montgomery County Police, Child Welfare Services, the Office of the County Attorney, and the State's Attorney's Office to provide an array of skilled services to the county's children and families who are impacted by physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, including medical evaluations, mental health assessments, and treatment, forensic interviewing, case management, and victim advocacy in a safe, child-focused, culturally competent setting. And whereas
the Treehouse Child Advocacy Center works to prevent child abuse and inform the community about how to protect children and how to assist children if abuse occurs. And
whereas the Treehouse Child Advocacy Center believes that the cycle of child abuse can be broken and that child abuse and neglect is preventable. Now, therefore, do we, Mark Elrich as County Executive, Nancy Navarro as County Council President, and Sidney Katz as County Council Vice President, do hereby proclaim the month of April 2019 is National Child Abuse Prevention Month in Montgomery County. We encourage residents to join the Treehouse Tour, the Cookie, on Saturday, May 4th, 2019, for a day of fun, festivities, and philanthropy as it seeks to raise awareness of child abuse prevention and promote the work of the Treehouse Child Advocacy Center.
very good. Thank you.
Signed by all three of us.
Absolutely. And my colleagues, please, you want to join us or you want to stand? Why don't you come down and join us?
Wonderful. So our next proclamation recognizes International Transgender Day of Visibility by Councilmember Glass.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to invite everybody up who spent some time with us this morning, representing themselves, friends, families, members of the community. Yeah. Yeah, let's bring the kids. Come on. Excellent. Great. Slide over here. We got more room over here. Come on. Excellent. So this is my first proclamation, and it is a personal one for me as the council's first openly LGBTQ member to recognize International Transgender Day of Visibility. And this is the first time that this day has been recognized here in Montgomery County. It has been recognized nationally for the last 10 years. And it's all about community, because we know that we live in an open, loving, welcoming community, but we can always do better. And that's the conversation that we had this morning about how we can make Montgomery County an even more welcoming place for every single resident, regardless of where you're from, the gender you were born with, where you live, who you love, what language you speak. And it is also important because yesterday I sent a letter to the county executive who's here today, who has begun a national search for the new chief of the Montgomery County Police Department. And I asked him to make sure that throughout that process we are mindful of the LGBTQ dimension of making sure that we live in an inclusive community, because members of the LGBTQ community are individuals who are victims of hate crimes. And the most number of hate crimes here in Montgomery County over the last number of years have affected members of the LGBTQ community more than anybody else. And I also just want to share one personal anecdote regarding this morning. All of us had a really important conversation about how we can improve things here in Montgomery County. And there was a sign on the 3rd floor of this building directing people where to go for a meeting. And within 10 minutes of that sign being posted, it was torn down. Somebody clearly didn't think that meeting was worth having or didn't want individuals going to it. And that's right here in the Montgomery County Council building. So this conversation, this proclamation is even more important because we have to change hearts and minds right here in our own building. And with that, I would like to invite some folks to speak. Lee Blinder, you want to say comments?
My name is Lee Blinder, and I use they, them pronouns. I'm the executive director of Trans Healthcare Maryland, and we're focused on being a liaison between the trans community and providers, medical providers, legal providers. And myself and Lily Pastor both grew up in Montgomery County, and we know the amazing diversity that's here in the county, but both of us also grew up without models and support specifically for being transgender persons. And I'm a non-binary transgender person. I'm also queer. And it's so important for our youth to have models and mirrors as we grow up. And I can be a model and a mirror to some of our youth, but there's a connection that people must have to see themselves as an adult. And the public health aspect is also very important, making sure that we have appropriate, comprehensive, and affirming care, health care for our community members. You know, we hear from parents that they're afraid to bring their child to the emergency room. And that's a fear that our community members who are adults, and specifically also our elders, people are facing those fears. And so we can do a lot to bring our joy and to bring our presence to our communities here and the transgender folks of Montgomery County. I am inspired by our youth, I'm inspired by our elders, and I'm inspired by my fellow adults. So I'm very much looking forward to what we're going to accomplish together.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Lee. Mark Eckstein. Mark.
Thanks, Evan. I just wanted to speak on behalf of some parents and thank you for bringing this proclamation and speak about the importance of our children in the schools that we have here in front of us. And while the parents realize that the council doesn't have direct operational control of a lot of the schools, we encourage you in your budgetary role to really look through the lens with our kids in mind, because the power of the purse is quite powerful, and we're hoping to really get the county council behind some of our needs and concerns with the school district. So again, thank you, Evan, and we appreciate all your help.
Thank you, Mark. And Kayla. Is Kayla here? Oh, there you are.
Yeah. Okay. Hi, my name is Kayla Tangea. I'm the first GSA liaison for the Montgomery County Regional SGA. But beyond my title on the exec board, I consider myself just to be an ordinary student at MCPS, or at least that's what I had to teach myself because the curriculum wouldn't. Visibility is incredibly important because they can try to keep us out of the textbooks we read, but not out of the classrooms we fill. This is why I continuously fight for gender-neutral bathrooms and a school curriculum that extensively teaches LGBT history at all grade levels, because no one should have to go what I had to go through, or they spent their whole lives wondering where they were in history. And so I will continue to fight so that they don't, or no one doesn't have to go through what I did. Thank you.
Thank you, Kayla. Here, stand here. Hang up here. Excellent. There you go. So with that, I will read the proclamation. The County Council of Montgomery County, Maryland proclamation. Whereas this is the 10th year that International Transgender Day of Visibility has been honored nationally, and today is the first time we have honored it in Montgomery County. And whereas Transgender Day of Visibility is dedicated to celebrating the accomplishments and victories of transgender and non-binary people, while raising awareness of the work that is still needed to better support them. And whereas non-binary and transgender residents are an active and important part of Montgomery County community, but continue to face discrimination. And whereas county officials understand that we must replace cycles of trauma with cycles of liberation and understanding. And Montgomery County is committed to fighting oppression based on gender identity in all its forms. And whereas Montgomery County promotes equity across race, gender, socioeconomic status, so that every community member feels safe, and our residents support a beautifully diverse community in all aspects, including gender identity and sexual orientation. And whereas non-binary and transgender residents are our neighbors, our teachers, our family members, and their visibility ensures communities are not silenced. And whereas the Montgomery County Council demands a stronger, healthier, and more loving world for non-binary and transgender people. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the County Council of Montgomery County, Maryland hereby recognizes International Transgender Day of Visibility and affirms Montgomery County's commitment to the rights of non-binary and transgender residents, presented on this day, the 2nd day of April in the year 2019, signed by myself and Council President Nancy Navarro.
Thank you so much. Now we move to our general business announcements. Ms. Limarcy.
Thank you. Good morning. The council is seeking applicants for the Montgomery County Planning Board. There are 2 positions to be filled. Applicants may supply their materials up until April 24th at 5 p.m. There is an addendum this morning, a correction to item 3A. The title of Expedited Bill 919 is Consolidated Retiree Health Benefits Trust Delegation of Duties. Item 4A, the corrective map amendment has been deleted. The council did receive a petition this week. It was from Montgomery County Faith Alliance for Climate Solutions in support of Bill 719, Environmental Sustainability, Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy Program, New Construction. It was signed by 9 members of the community. That's it today.
Thank you. So the minutes of March 15th and 19th were distributed ahead of time to all council members. Are there any corrections? Hearing none, those minutes are then adopted and approved. Item number 2, consent calendar. I need a motion.
So moved.
Moved by Council Vice President Katz, second by Councilmember Reamer. I understand that there is a correction for item E. Mr. Science.
Yes, we have a correction to the rate of increase proposed. The first sentence was wrong, the last sentence was correct. It's 5% proposed rate increase, and of course, it's being introduced today. That correction is before you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Council President Navarro. And I just wanted to point out item D, the resolution to set the amount of the property tax credit for income tax offset. And this is a credit first implemented in 2010 to give relief to middle-class homeowners, over 240,000 in the county. And I think it's important, we'll be talking in the GO committee, obviously your committee, but I think it's important to look at increasing this tax credit at a time when state and local deductions have been decreased for families and they're continually squeezed. I'd like to look at increasing this tax credit locally to help our middle-class families. So we'll be talking about that more, but I just wanted to pull that item out and make sure that I flagged it for folks. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, the GO committee will take that into consideration. We will explore different scenarios and we'll take a close look at the implications of the different amounts of tax credits. We've done that in the past. There have been some concerns about actually having to do a property tax increase, and so that's what we will be discussing and bringing to the full council. With that, see no other lights. So all those in favor, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous among those present. All right, so for legislative session, this is our 8th day, introduction of bills. We have expedited bill 9-19, Consolidated Retiree Benefits Trust, delegation of duties. And I am the lead sponsor on behalf of the Board of Trustees for the Consolidated Retiree Health Benefits Trust. This bill would enable the Board of Trustees for the Consolidated Retiree Health Benefits Trust to delegate trust fund management authority to the Executive Director or a similarly situated county employee. There's a public hearing already scheduled for April 30th at 1:30. Mr. Drummer, is there anything else you'd like to add regarding this introduction?
No, you covered it.
Perfect. All right, so that's introduced. I like that speech a lot. Okay, so now item 4 has been deleted as it was previously mentioned, so we're going to move on to item 5, which is our semi-annual report of the Montgomery County Planning Board.
All right. Thank you, Council President Nancy Navarro. We are going to go through the semi-annual report, and I'll say for my colleagues, the way that we handle this, generally speaking, is we'll get a presentation from the Planning Board about their proposed work program for the master plan schedule, the schedule of proposed master plans, and then we will take that up through the Fed committee over the next 6-8 weeks as it's fundamentally a budget issue. Is the allocation of the budget sufficient to support the proposed work plan? Are there changes in the work plan? So we'll have some dialogue today, but just if there's something you think that the planning board ought to be looking at that we're not, I have some ideas. Really, you can float things today, but really it's a follow-up item. So we'll take those and listen to the discussion today. It may spark something in your mind, and you've got a little time to kind of put that down on paper. So we're going to get a presentation from our chairs and our department directors, and Pam has got a packet for us, and I'll kick it to Pam.
Good morning. I'd like to welcome the Planning Board, Planning Chair, the Planning Director, the Parks Director. They do have a great presentation for you. They have numerous videos to show you the great work that they have engaged in the last 6 months to year, and to show you the things that they think about as they're looking to the future. So I'm not going to dwell on any of that. You do have the staff report before you. If there's any questions you have on that, I'm happy to answer them. But I know they have a lot that they'd like to present to you, so I'm going to turn it over to them.
Chairman Casey Anderson, why don't you introduce your colleagues and take it away?
Thank you. We have Commissioner Dreyfus, Commissioner Sicci here. Commissioner Patterson is on her way. Commissioner Fena-Gonzalez had a family obligation that prevents her from attending. But I wanted to mention, and we'll get back to this in the presentation, this is Commissioner Dreyfus's final semi-annual with us. He's reaching the end of his term, so we want to make sure that we remember many of the contributions that Norman has made, and I know that you all have appreciated his service as we have. The other thing I wanted to do quickly is introduce a few key staff people who we've added recently that I think people you will probably be interacting with, and people who are going to be playing really key roles within.
Before you do that, can I just pause for a second? And I do want to acknowledge and really thank you, Mr. Dreyfus, for your service. I think that you have added very important contributions and perspectives to the work of the Planning Board, and really do appreciate you stepping up and deciding to serve here in our county. So I just want to applaud you for that extraordinary work. Thank you, Mr. Anderson.
Screen, Mr. Dreyfus.
Understand when I
Oh, there it is. Look.
I understand when I retire that I get a car. Is that true?
You might get a plate.
It's a Matchbox car.
Yeah.
I think Casey has a bike for you.
That's right. That's right. I wanted to introduce a few recent staff additions that I think are really people who are going to play very important roles we're very excited about. First, and if they could just stand up when they're here. The first is Daniel Singh, who has just joined us recently to run the park programming functions. Many of you know that we've placed a lot of emphasis on programming in urban parks and partnerships to make that economically sustainable. And he has a lot of fantastic experience in the region at putting together park programs, and we know that you're going to be interested in working with him in each of your districts and all different parts of the county to bring park programs to even more exciting. So we're very excited to have him. Second person I wanted to mention, who you probably have met, he's sort of newish. He's not just freshly on the job, but Chief Daryl McSwain, who comes to us from Montgomery County Police, and he's already been doing just a fantastic job with the Park Police, and I know many of you already know him from his previous role. The third person I wanted to mention is Jay Cole, who's also emphatically not a newcomer. Jay has worked for us for several years, but she has just become the chief of the Park Planning and Stewardship Division. Now, if you looked at the organizational chart, she's a division chief, so she's not at the top of the organization, but that would be very misleading. Park Planning and Stewardship is perhaps the key division in the entire agency, if not the Parks Department, or at least the Parks Department. Plays a tremendous role in shaping the park system, not only in its natural resource conservation role, but also in figuring out what kind of parks need to be acquired and developed in the future, and we're just very excited to have her in this role. Her predecessor, John Hench, made a very large imprint on this agency. I know many of you worked with him over a period of years, and I'm confident that Jay is going to not only pick up where he left off, but put her own stamp on the Parks Department, and really look forward to you all getting to know her in this role. So with that, I want to turn it over, and I should mention to those of you for whom this is your first semi-annual, we alternate back and forth. One semi-annual we will give parks the sort of center stage, and planning will also make a presentation, but it won't be the centerpiece. The other semi-annual will flip that, so planning gets to take the central role, so to give us more of an opportunity to get into depth into each department. So the next semi-annual, you'll hear more from planning. So with that, I will turn it over to our directors. Oh, first we have video for Norman. Yes, can't forget that.
There were lots of individual plans and certainly master plans where Norman had a big role in the discussions. And he could do things like say that to a developer, well, you know, you're saying you can't do this at 70 feet, but I know you can. And he could say that in a way that the rest of the planning board couldn't because of his knowledge base. And he could ask questions that the rest of us would not even think to ask. So that was all really helpful.
Norman Dreyfus has been one of the, I think, most vocal and helpful planning board members that we've had, at least during my tenure. He worked so hard on things like the zoning rewrite and made a huge contribution to that project, which has really had impact on the whole county. He's also been really involved in some of our most significant master plans, including Chevy Chase Lake, the Wheaton Central Business District Plan, the Bethesda Downtown Plan, the White Oak Science Gateway, and it just goes on and on and on. And he was very, very critical to each of those projects. He always has been able to come in and talk to us not just about what's a good idea, but what's actually practical and viable. And he always grounds us in that way to help us make sure that when we make recommendations, they aren't just pie in the sky. They are really viable, buildable recommendations.
Norman always has taken interest in the historic stores, the Red Door store, the Darby store, Pool store. Those are all owned by parks. And in particular, Norman has always asked, are you going to sell food at these stores? It's really important that you guys have the ability to sell food. And we've said, oh, trust us, Norman, it's our goal to sell food. We must sell food. We agree with you. So sadly for us, try as we might in the Department of Parks, we couldn't get a perk, so that meant no food was able to be sold at the Darby store. So Norman goes out there with his wife on a weekend to check it out, and he comes back and he says, we couldn't get a cup of coffee. We couldn't get a sandwich. We couldn't get anything to eat. This is crazy. And we said, Norman, can you help us? And he said, yeah, I can help you. And within a week, Norman Dreyfus, the director's office, the president of the council, Nancy Florine, the head of DPS, they all got together and they fixed our problem. And we were thrilled. We were so happy, as was the store operator.
I've known him for a long time, and I know that he's proud of everything he's done because he always wants to do good. That's why when I said as a developer, he's not apologetic for it because he's a good developer. I mean, he's done some great projects all over. And so our lives have intersected, and I'm really happy to call him my friend because I do consider him a friend. I wish him a lot of luck moving forward, and I think we're gonna miss him a lot as he spends more time in Colorado.
We're so grateful again to Norman for his tenacity and his can-do attitude. He just jumps in and helps fix things, and I'm really gonna miss that.
He has really devoted a great deal of time and energy in giving back to a community that I think he loves.
That's a very special recognition when you are anointed as the good developer.
I thought I was just a pain in the ass. I didn't know. Well, it's really very, very nice of everybody to. I guess I'm an example of aging in place.
Well, I'm sure we haven't heard the last of Norman. I'm optimistic that he won't decamp to Colorado permanently. He'll come back and see us and continue to contribute. I also just wanted to acknowledge that Commissioner Patterson has arrived. Yes. So with that, we'll turn it over to the department directors.
Good morning. It's great to be here. Mike Riley. I'm going to take a little time to tell you about some of the great things happening in the parks. I missed my appointment to do my video for Commissioner Dreyfus, so I just wanted to add that he was absolutely instrumental in negotiating the entire Wheaton redevelopment project with the county. and with the developer who's going, obviously our building is going to open in a year, and we're all going to move in, do great things in Wheaton, and then our site down in Silver Spring will be redeveloped into a mixed-use development. And his experience at the table, working with Al Rashdi at DOT and all the other parties that were involved in making that deal happen, was absolutely instrumental. So I want to thank him for that. So we're going to start on the park side. I always show you a lot of PowerPoint slides with great pictures, but we thought we'd start with a brief video that just shows you some of the cool things that happened in the parks over the last 6 months.
Activation is a real community anchor in Montgomery Parks. We are one of the few counties in the whole country that has activation as a central focus for the park system. The previous focus on art activation was really in a smaller scale event, and now we're looking at expanding it across the whole county, looking at what the county needs are and bringing people into our green spaces, addressing health and wellness needs. And we're also looking at the social equity lens and what can we do to bridge the gaps that are in our county for underserved communities. And the last piece of this is also looking ahead a few years down the road and integrating physical design in our parks that's interactive. So people don't just come and sit in our parks, but they come in there, play, experience the murals, play with the sculptures and the fountains. So we really want to think about how the park design itself can be a part of the activation process.
We're currently here today to view a demonstration for some new innovative technology that's been brought to our attention to reduce costs as well as increase efficiencies, and at the same time for the reduction of pesticides on park property.
I'll tell you what you're looking at later in my presentation.
Is to provide recreational opportunities that are sustainable, safe, and playable for both youth and adult athletes. We are able to achieve this by providing higher levels of maintenance through additional resources and looking at innovative techniques for maintaining sports turf and athletic fields.
My role is to help with the kids who want to help throughout the community, clean it up. We all live here, so we thought it was very important to show taking pride in where we live and also give back as service, because many times we think about ourselves and we don't think about serving others and serving the community where we live. So my role today is to help the students fulfill their goal of performance service to the community.
In all of our facilities from Montgomery Parks, safety is always our #1 priority. Montgomery Parks is fully committed to the ideals and the goals of Vision Zero. In fact, in 2018, we completed construction on 10 new crossings along State Highway and Montgomery County DOT-controlled roads. We're on a robust schedule to complete all of our crossings by hopefully 2023.
I hope you enjoyed that. After all this time with the parks, I'm still amazed and learning things that are going on out there that even I don't know about. So thank you for sharing that. So my first slide here, the photo, this is taken at the Friendship Picnic. This is the 6th annual. One was last fall. This we do with the Office of Human Rights with James Stowe and a lot of other partners. The purpose of it is to bring people of diverse cultures and faiths together to make new friends and discuss ways to build a stronger community. And as you know, this is just one of many great events that we do in the parks on an annual basis, and I'm going to touch on some more as we go forward. So I'm going to start with trails. Usage data and surveys continue to tell us that our trails are among our most highly utilized and desired facilities. They serve so many different purposes, from community building to promoting physical fitness, connecting our communities, providing a transportation benefit, and providing access to nature. That's why they're one of our top 3 priorities and remain on the top of the pile. And we just believe that a great trail network is a component of creating a community where people want to live. As of today, we're up to 245 miles of park trails in the county, of which 62 are paved and 183 are natural surface. I just want to share with you an experience I had Saturday on the Capitol Crescent Trail. It was one of the first pretty weekend days where the weather was great. I went out there on my bike with my GoPro, and it really is the super highway if you haven't been there when it's packed. It's walkers, dog walkers, joggers, recreational bicyclists, high-speed bicyclists, stroller pushers. But what you really see is people smiling, doing healthy, fun activities. Now, if you are a high-speed commuting bicyclist, that is not when you want to be out on the Capitol Crescent Trail, because you will get frustrated. But if you're a recreational bicyclist just enjoying the sights, it's a great way to see a lot of people really enjoying one of our park facilities. So I'll talk about 3 particular projects here. These photos are from the opening of the Power Line Trail that ultimately will run from Cabin John to Germantown. We opened in October the first 6-mile segment, which goes from Quince Orchard to Germantown. That is my Deputy Director, Mitra Pedoim, on the top picture leading the way on the inaugural bike ride. I did want to give a shout out to Mitra. This will be her last semi-annual, as well as she has announced her retirement effective the end of May. So I want to thank her for her many years of service to State Highway Administration, Montgomery County DOT, and her last 15 years with the park. She has really put her stamp on all the great things that are happening in the park system. In the bottom photo is Dave Velasquez from PEPCO with former County Executive Leggett, and you see Chair Anderson, Councilmember Rice, and I in the background. It was really a precedent-setting project, and we're pleased to announce that we will be working on the next 6-mile segment this spring that will go from Quince Orchard to Cabin John, and have that open in 2020. And one of the most important aspects of any trail is when you encounter a road that you want to get people across safely in the whole spirit of Vision Zero. And I really need to thank Montgomery County DOT, particularly Al Rosti, Chris Conklin, and John Hubler for working with us on the segment that opened. There were 10 road crossings, 8 county, 2 state, and they worked with us very closely to assure that best practices were put in at each of those crossings so that our trail users could cross safely. And then also thank Greg Slater from State Highway for expediting the 2 state roads, which were 118 and 128. The second project, the Upper Paint Branch Trail Plan, was approved by the board, and we're in an implementation phase. That plan promotes a sustainable multi-use trail network in East County, where there was a low level of service identified. It provides links to parks, community destinations, and a larger countywide trail network, and it provides access to very outstanding natural areas. As you know, a lot of county money went into protecting the water system in the Upper Paint Branch, and we want people to have access to those outstanding natural resources so that they can appreciate them. We've built a couple miles of trail thus far, and are going to continue on until we implement the first phase in the coming year. And then the last project I want to reference is very exciting. It's brand new. The Rails to Trails Conservancy has announced an extremely ambitious project called the Great American Rail Trail. I'll just read a few statements from their press release. Picture yourself pedaling across the entire country on a safe, seamless, scenic pathway or walking a local trail that connects along historic routes. The experience of exploring America's heritage, its potential, its beauty, its bounty, its people, its places. The intimacy of taking in all the country has to offer from the most personal advantage point, the trail. So they're going to try to get this momentum behind this, and the beginning portion of this trail would be our own Capitol Crescent Trail, beginning in Georgetown and running from Bethesda if that vision is realized. So we will pay attention to that and are very excited about that project. So this is just, I'll explain this data here. One of Casey Anderson's mandates for parks and planning is that we manage our programs by data and by analytics. This shows our natural surface trail construction program. The top blue line is the number of miles that have been built per year between 2013 and 2018. The dashed line in the middle is our staffing levels. And then the bottom two lines show not where we've built new trails, but where we have rerouted trails, where they were built originally, or there were people's choice trails that were in wetlands and wet areas that were unsustainable and unusable most of the year, where we've taken them and rerouted them to make them sustainable, and then naturalize the areas through reforestation or wetland creation. So we're seeing great results with the resources you have provided us, and I thank you for that. Continuing with trails, this photo is of a modular bridge. It's the Western Piedmont Trail Bridge in Little Bennett Park. That is a key component of a natural surface trail system there that was funded in part with a $105,000 bond bill from District 15. So I want to thank particularly Senator Feldman and Delegate David Frazier Hidalgo. To digress on that issue, I am going to be able to share really great news with the Planning Board and the Council next week about the results of our work in Annapolis to secure state funding through other bond bills, about at least 4 projects that where state money is going to be coming to Montgomery County through our delegation, and I will thank them profusely, as I'm sure you will want to also. 2 things I wanted to highlight here. Rainout line, much like athletic fields, natural surface trails can be damaged significantly if they're used when they are saturated, so we have begun a program where we can close trails when we've had too much rain or snowmelt, so that they're not used and the users will be notified. And then we also are working with Montgomery County DOT on allowing e-bikes on certain areas of our park trails. As of today, any motorized bike or vehicle is prohibited on a park trail, but we know they're out there already. I saw them on the Capitol Crescent Trail last Saturday, and the county is getting ready to launch a dockless e-bike program, and we're coordinating with them to allow commensurate use on park trails. And then lastly, on trails, we have our own capital project for Vision Zero. We've identified 121 locations where park trails cross roads. We're able, with our current funding, to improve about 10 intersections per year. And there are 2 intersections of particular interest I just wanted to note. I still meet regularly with State Highway and DOT and County Police about the Henson crossing at Veers Mill Road, where unfortunately we had experienced fatalities. It is much improved, but there is still more to be done, and I'm not going to quit on that until I believe that we've done absolutely everything we can do to make that intersection as safe as possible. And then on Little Falls Parkway, where the Capitol Crescent Trail crosses, we'll be taking recommendations to the Planning Board shortly about alternatives to improve that intersection as well, where unfortunately we did have a fatality. So moving on to athletic fields, our theme is really getting the most out of natural grass, and we're making great strides. This is just one renovation we did. This is Blueberry Hill Local Park in Durwood. It was a field that's very highly desired and used. It's right near the Shady Grove Metro. Great location. It was not, it had kind of bowed out in the middle and captured water in the middle of the field, so it didn't drain well. So our team went in there and brought in topsoil to level it out, and then sodded the middle of the field, seeded the outside, and used growth blankets to grow the grass even when the temperatures were cool, and you can see the results there on the right. So I really wanted to focus on the school fields this presentation. Just historically, parks foray into the elementary and middle school started around the year 2000, and there was a big effort where millions of dollars were spent over about 3 years. And then we had a downtick in the economy and things kind of flattened out. And the status quo just persisted up till about 3 years ago, where we began renovating additional schools through the benefit of excess fund balance and the Community Use of Public Schools Fund, which makes sense because a lot of that fund balance is from field fees for school fields. So as you can see, we're just under half of the elementary schools have been renovated by us and we maintain. And the majority of the middle schools, and that makes sense because back when we started this program, the real focus was on renovating the larger sites where you could get game capacity out of the renovated school fields. But now I think there's more a focus on equity, about making sure that all the kids in all the elementary and middle schools have a safe play to play outdoors. And even some of the more difficult down county schools we're ready to tackle and move into. So over the last few years, we've taken on an additional 14 schools thanks to the allocation of $1 million in CUP fund balance. We have asked for another $250 in fiscal year 20 to carry on that program. I still need to seek clarification from the executive whether they are recommending that or not. That is not clear. Hopefully I will get that clarity before the Education Committee takes up the CUP budget during the budget cycle, but I will be asking your support to continue that program. I did want to really compliment Andy Zuckerman, Essie McGuire, James Song, Seth Adams from MCPS. We meet regularly. Casey joins us. We're taking this issue very seriously, so it's being handled at that level, and they are collaborating with us on this. They certainly support our additional renovation and maintenance of school fields. And moving on to activation, that photo you see is of Sister Cities Park in Philadelphia. Our team, including the chair, the planning director, and others involved in our Urban Parks Initiative, have visited 3 cities so far over the last few years. We've been to Richmond, Pittsburgh, and Philadelphia. Our next foray coming up soon is to Baltimore, but we're just making sure that we're understanding exactly what's going on in these urban parks in the bigger cities so that we're experts as we need to be. I will also be attending the Greater and Greener Conference hosted by the City Parks Alliance in Denver in July, where the focus there is all about parks within the dense cities and how they're managed, maintained, and made active. So you just met Daniel Singh. We could not be more excited to have on board. I think he's going to do a great job. You have every reason to respect a big ramp up in this program, and we intend to deliver. You just see some of the programs that we have around the corner that we plan to do shortly. I do want to thank, in particular, Bethesda Urban Partnership is more than anxious with us to continue to partner on Yappy Hour in Bethesda, and we'll be looking to all the other districts for partnership opportunities as well. These 2 photos here you see, one on the top is Kites Over Clarksburg at Ovid Hazen Wells that just happened on a beautiful day last weekend, and on the bottom is the Color and Kite Festival, which in the video was the photo where you saw folks throwing the dye up into the air. And that's at Black Hill Regional Park. So 3 areas of focus right now. Everyone wants a dog park. That's not just a Montgomery County issue. That's a national issue where the desire for communities to have dog parks just continues to grow. And we are in the focus of a suitability study to select the most appropriate sites to build them. We're in a public input phase, so anyone out there who has a dog or is interested should be on our website giving their points of view about the where. And then we're going to follow up with companion efforts on 2 other highly desired park amenities, which are skate parks and community gardens in the coming year. So one project we're very, very excited about, we presented to you last year our Energized Public Spaces Functional Plan. That was a GIS-based effort where we actually went out and mapped every single recreational opportunity and every single contemplative opportunity in the areas of the county that have high population, and then we calculated level of service. So that effort really tells us about the where we should focus and the kind of what is needed. This next companion document, the design guidelines, drills down, and it really tells the developer or the designer or the planner how you create a vibrant space. It gets into very specific details about the attributes and amenities that make places places that people want to be. It'll be not only of use to park staff, but to planning staff and developers. And one of the best things about it is it utilizes case studies to show for areas of all sizes, case studies from around the country of successful urban spaces and what has made them vibrant, popular places that people want to be. So I expect to be back here next semi-annual telling you about awards that we've received from this effort, because I really think it's cutting edge. And now I'm on just to general park projects that we have achieved. That photo there is of the Joan and John O'Rourke greenhouse at Brookside Gardens that we opened in September through their generous donation of over $1 million. You know, greenhouses aren't very sexy, but this is really an integral part of infrastructure to run a great place like Brookside Gardens. It's going to enable us to grow a diverse array of more than 20,000 plants each year. It includes 10,000 square feet of indoor growing area with 4 separate climate zones, 11,000 square feet of outdoor growing area, and then a system to harvest rainwater from the roof to water plants. And it's all very highly high-tech and computerized so that it can provide the appropriate environment for plants in any type of weather. And this graph just shows some of the other projects we've done, starting on the left in the fall of 2008. I just spoke about the Brookside greenhouse. A little later in the fall, we cut the ribbon at the Good Hope Local Park and Community Center, which is a project we partnered with Department of General Services of county government, who renovated the community center building. Then we opened the trail project in Little Bennett Park, where I showed you the bridge at Western Piedmont Trail. And then now moving on, the Kensington Cabin opening was accomplished thanks to a generous donation from the Under Armour Foundation to name that cabin and reopen it after being closed for more than a decade after the former mayor Jane Plank. And then very late in the fall, we opened the Neil Potter Plaza at the Capitol Crescent Trail thanks to a $380,000 donation from the Coalition for the Capitol Crescent Trail. So as you can see, we are busy trying to drum up resources to support the parks from all different angles. Moving forward this spring, some great projects. Maydale Nature Center is under construction. We're making great progress. We hope to have an opening for that in May or June. We're in the midst of doing a park refresher at Battery Lane Urban Park in Bethesda. And then lastly, we are also doing a park refresher which should be completed at Pinecrest Local Park in Silver Spring. So this is just an example of the park refresher concept. This is Dewey Local Park in Randolph Hills. I've talked to this many times in the last few semi-annuals. Our goal is to be able to do these community park renewals faster and at a lower cost so that we can spread the resources more equitably around the county. This one will include a dog park, it will include a futsal court, and it will include a community garden. So we're getting a lot of our new and emerging amenities accomplished through the refresher program. On water quality, as you know, an awful lot of discussion last year through the budget cycle on NPDES permits and water quality programs. We did receive our own MS4 permit from MDE in October, which requires us to retrofit components of the park system along a timeline to provide stormwater. You also may recall that we ended up being funded to complete 4 stream restoration projects in the parks, where we will do those projects and then provide the resultant credit back to Montgomery County government so that DEP will benefit from those credits. And then lastly, the source of funding for those projects is the state's Water Quality Revolving Loan Fund. That's for both us and the county, and we have applied for the grant for those funds, and we expect to receive approval for about $4.8 million, tentatively in May 2019, and then finally later in September 2019. Couldn't be more proud of our volunteer program. It continues to grow. It really is a huge community building effort. This is just some data again about how the different components that our volunteers contribute their time for. You see in the center in fiscal year 2018, 82,000 hours, which is just absolutely incredible. Some of the biggest volunteer efforts we have are for our park cleanups to keep the trash out of the stream valleys and the streams, our Weed Warrior program to remove non-native invasive plants, history and archaeology for interpretation and of our historic sites. A lot of volunteers at our nature centers to run programs. The largest is Brookside Gardens. Who wouldn't want to volunteer at Brookside Gardens and spend their time there? And then lastly, the park police have a lot of help for certain support functions for the police. So I need to profusely thank them all. Next slide is just a summary again. If you took all of that volunteer effort in 1 year, it's about $2 million of value added, which would be about 40 full-time career positions in the Parks Department. So it is not insignificant at all. This is another thing we're really proud of. I can't take credit for the idea. Planning Director Wright has had a planning speaker series for years that has been successful, and I could not be outdone. So we launched a park speaker series a few years ago. On the left, you see topics and speakers of some of the ones that we have already done. And I just wanted to give you a flavor, if I could, of the topics at some of these. So Ed McMahon, the case for open space. Ed McMahon is a senior resident from the Urban Lands Institute. He shared insight into the economic, social, and environmental impacts of park and open space. Micah Meyer, he's an adventurer that's closing in on the end of a 3-year journey to experience all 418 National Park Service sites. And when I introduced him, I said, who would ever think of visiting all the parks in a single
418,
system?
Casey, your record will stand.
Novel idea. His was a little more expensive than Cher Anderson's because he had to get to Hawaii and Alaska. So Micah, his journey quickly became a source of inspiration, encouraging people to live their dreams and shed an important light into the LGBTQ experience in the outdoors, so relevant to the proclamation that we saw earlier this morning. Shima Hai and Albert Aravalo, engaging diverse audiences, parks, and outdoor recreation. Albert is program coordinator for Latino Outdoors, and we examine misconceptions and stereotypes, current trends, and insights to the work being done to make the outdoor recreation experience more inclusive. Jason Roberts was Build a Better Block Foundation, who partnered with us on the placemaking activity we had in the Randolph Hills Shopping Center. And I will stop there, but I will know you're all very busy people and will be unlikely to make any of these, but if your staff can come, they're please invited. The upcoming event is April 30th, 12 to noon at MRO, and it will be speaker Nilay Bhatt speaking about building a culture of guest excellent service. And he is a park professional with a consulting firm called Pros Consulting that consults nationally around the country on best practices for parks and recreation. And I'm almost done. Pesticide reduction, a lot of discussion and communications. I have sent the council recently on the issue of pesticides. This is accordance with Chapter 33B of Montgomery County Code. You will recall there was a bill done several years ago that amended that chapter that had certain requirements in it, many for parks. Some of those requirements that we provide semi-annual reports to the council, that we manage our playgrounds without the use of pesticides, that we have a pesticide-free park program. We are continue to test alternatives and then enhance notification protocols when pesticides are used in the park. I did want to highlight that we were required to do an organic athletic field pilot. I sent you a letter yesterday saying that we have had some complications and delays with that, and I proposed an alternative, and I'll be happy to discuss that during Q&A, but I also recommend that we have a briefing for the Fed committee on how to proceed with that aspect of the requirements on us. And then lastly, I'm sorry for this. This is my last slide, and I'm sorry to be a downer, and I know it's hard to read, but this is out of the executive's recommended budget. The red circled line shows the allocation for park and planning. It's up 0.8%, which on the surface doesn't sound that bad, but that is not even adequate to cover what we expect will be required to compensate our employees, not to mention other known commitments in the budget, like the operating costs of new parks, or the opening of the new Wheaton headquarters, or things like paying the bills for ball fields we have irrigated through our ball field program. So we will be talking to the Fed committee and the council to seek for some sort of assistance through the budget process and the reconciliation process as we proceed through April and May. So that's it for parks, and I thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much. That was a very wonderful, I think, comprehensive overview. I do want to commend everybody that works so hard. You're absolutely right. Saturday was just gorgeous, and I also had an opportunity to take my little furry grand doggy on a walk, since I was babysitting when my daughter was out of town. Took him to the regional. Wheaton Regional Wheaton Regional Park, but to the trail behind the skating rink, and it was wonderful. So much so that on Sunday I realized that he was waiting for me to take him again. So it was just a really enjoyable opportunity. So we do have a lot of lights. I just wanted to point to one particular item. In terms of activating, parks and programming parks activities, I saw that there was a Cinco de Mayo proposal there. And so I just wanted to recommend, I think we have an extraordinary programming that happens at the Silver Spring Civic Building. I know, like, for example, Sandy Spring Museum, I attended this amazing Afro-Puerto Rican bomba dance workshop. I think it had over 80 people there. Many of them was the first time attending anything at the Sandy Spring Museum. I just want to recommend, we have extraordinary activities happening that are very culturally relevant and also attract a lot of people from all over the county that may not even be from that community. I mean, at the Puerto Rican Afro Dance, there were people from every single segment of the community. And so perhaps that's a great way to just collaborate with some of these folks to see if many of those kinds of activities can be brought to the parks. Cinco de Mayo is really mostly a celebration that the United States has co-opted. It really is not like a traditional, either Mexican or Latino celebration. So it's sort of seen as very, stereotypical in some ways. But I just think that we have extraordinary opportunities to expand what's happening, both, for example, in the Civic Building or even in World of Montgomery or in the Sandy Spring Museum, into the parks and really expose everybody to do this. And I had a great time at this, Afro-Puerto Rican dance class. I see Grace Rivera Oven here as well. We had a really awesome time. And it was the first time I ever did anything like that. But I just feel like there's just so much that we don't have to go and reinvent the wheel. Let's just collaborate with those folks and bring it out, to the park. So just really want to commend that kind of work that is happening because it's just wonderful and it makes everybody so happy to be able to take advantage of those opportunities. All right. So with that, let's see Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you, Council President Navarro, and thank you for a great report. First, I just wanted to thank Chair Anderson, Ms. Wright, Mr. Riley, all three of you as a new member of the Fed Committee, as the new Parks lead. Your help, advice, consultation in getting me caught up to speed on a lot of what was covered here today over the last several months has just been really invaluable to me and to my staff to be able to hit the ground running. And so I really do just sincerely appreciate all of the work you've done to explain to me as if I was a third grader how this works, and many of my colleagues believe that I am. So I appreciate it. They're lipping it as I say it. So. And the breadth of our parks system is just extraordinary. 421 parks, 37,000 acres of parkland. I'm hoping after some conversations with the comptroller and the treasurer will be 422 after tomorrow with an opportunity in the Westbard area, which is, I think, another example of the creativity with which the Parks Department has taken up its role in acquiring new and activating existing spaces, and want to thank you for that. And I'm glad you mentioned the Great American Trail, Mr. Riley. I got briefed on that, and what was most amazing to me in that briefing wasn't the full map of the United States and what the plan was for this, but I asked, what do we need to do in Montgomery County in order to make this happen, in order to start our piece of it? And they said almost nothing, because we already have such an extensive existing trail network, which I think is a testament to a lot of work that has happened well before I ever got here, and a lot of work in your department and from those who have come before me and those who are sitting up here to really invest in and focus on these trails and focus on our parks and to make sure that it is meeting the needs of our residents. I think that we need to continue to do that. I think we need to build upon that. So I take your comments on the budget to heart. I also know we had an extensive conversation on the ball field cup question, and Mr. Reamer and I were very adamant, I think reflecting what the council's, the previous council's priorities have been in terms of allowing the Parks Department to take over more and more of these fields. And I'm hopeful that we can, per our insistence at the last Fed meeting where we discussed this, to be even more ambitious with that. And I know you have not been provided with funding, at least in the existing proposed budget, in order to do that. But I hope that we can continue that conversation at the Fed committee. With that, I did have a couple parks-related questions. The first is, we talked about this quite a bit at Fed committee, but I just wanted to know if perhaps we had an update on the PIP in Bethesda and where things stand with that, and whether or not there are more materialized plans with where that currently is.
Yes, we do maintain a spreadsheet of priorities for both development and acquisition for the PIP. Some of them are on somewhat known timeframes. For example, something like developing the Capitol Crescent Civic Green once the Purple Line moves out of that space. Others, the acquisitions, of course, some of them are on less definite timelines, but I would be happy to share with Fed the list of priorities as we see them, which is, of course, evolving sometimes based on the availability of the property acquisitions.
That'd be great. I appreciate it if you could share that with us.
Yes.
And you mentioned Battery Lane Urban Park. Is that on schedule?
It is on schedule. It's on. I have the date to open it in my presentation here, but I believe it's this summer, this
Great.
spring or summer.
Great. If you could just share the
Yeah.
date of expectation. I'm glad to hear that's. I get to see it pretty much every day I walk by it, so it's good to hear that it's on schedule. There's definitely a tremendous amount of demand, and that's, as you know, a very highly trafficked trail as well of folks going to and from NIH and into downtown Bethesda from the neighborhood. And so, there's a lot of excitement to get that
May
open.
2019.
Great. And so
Right.
we expect it in May?
Yes.
Oh, fantastic.
I do really appreciate you asking that, because now my staff has all heard that.
Yeah, there you go.
You helped me with accountability.
There you go. Now we will hold you to it so you can hold them to it, and we'll make this a team effort. A question similarly on Wall Park. Is there any update on transforming that asphalt into a beautiful urban park that is going to be activated and utilized by many in the Pike District?
I don't have a recent update. It is all hinged on the developer Gables moving forward with the garage on site. There were some different understandings about their time frame, but I can circle back with county government and the developer to see whether they can give me a more solid time frame.
Yeah, that'd be great. And if I just want to make sure, so the the expectation there is still going to be through a supplemental appropriation. Is that still the
Yes.
plan?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay. Well, thank you so much. I just want to reiterate again my thanks and appreciation for the tremendous work that you do. Look forward to continuing that partnership. And also, I'm very hopeful and enthusiastic and continue to blast the megaphone on the dog park interest and the suitability study that you're doing, and we'll continue to push that. There is tremendous interest, as you know, from the first meeting, even before I got elected, where we discussed this, and really glad that you have taken the bull by the horns and are really pushing forward with that and are putting a real emphasis on community input to ensure that we have the ultimate dog park in a place where it will be activated in the most significant way. I call them our doggy residents because, for our dog owners doesn't seem sufficient enough. And so I appreciate all the support you're providing for our dog residents and our human residents as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Rice.
Thank you very much, Madam President, and thank you, Director Anderson, Director Riley, Chair Anderson, excuse me, I apologize, Casey. Let me just start off with one of the things that I feel is incredibly important, Mr. Riley, that you brought up, and that's about sustainable athletic fields and what we need to continue to do in terms of work in this county. And so certainly I heard Councilmember Friedson talk about this in terms of what needs to happen with our schools and making sure that they continue to be partners with us, and we need to step up to the plate when it comes to making sure that budgetarily we support you taking over. I really see this as another opportunity to focus on equity in our county. Some of that equity work that we all sat in that two-day session and talked about. And again, another example of where a budget is not reflecting the equity that we talked about. Because if it did, we would have seen some additional support for you to do that good work that we know other communities just don't have the money to do. There are some communities that have the money to be able to raise, to put in artificial turf field that's going to be playable all day, that they don't have to worry about a lot of maintenance that goes in. But there are so many communities throughout this county who struggle every single day, and the pictures that you show are what they still have, that before picture that you showed. And so I appreciate your dedication and the planning board's continual thinking about what it is that we need to do. It really is, again, a lost opportunity for us. And yet again, the council's going to have to step up to the plate and figure out how to make this happen. It's just, again, I wish it were easier for us at the starting point to be able to continue to have these conversations about, oh, great, everyone on both sides of the aisle are thinking about equity and how best to reach our communities, because it matters so much. And so I will close with one last one about equity that involves Clarksburg. And I know that you've seen the letter that I wrote to the Fed Committee, and I appreciate the Fed Committee in terms of its consideration, understanding that Clarksburg has grown from 2,000 residents to over 20,000, and in just another short 4.5 years, we'll be up to roughly about 40,000 residents. We have to build Ovid Hazen Wells Park out to what it was promised to our Clarksburg residents. This is not a should. It's, once again, I was at a meeting on Thursday with our county executive, and we were talking about promises that folks make when it comes to Vision Zero, and talking about the fact that, look, we said we were going to do this, and now we're holding our feet to the fire in terms of doing that, and we should, absolutely. But we should also honor our commitments to communities when we say that we're going to give them infrastructure, and it's the reason why they buy one of the most important purchases that they'll ever have in their lives, and that's their homes. And so having those resources that were promised to them is incredibly important. And so I appreciate your passion. I know, again, that you're making these tough decisions based on limitations in budget, but I I would just say that this is an incredibly important project. And Mr. Riley, if you could just share your thoughts in terms of where this ranks in your priorities in budget restoration, that would be important, I think, for us to hear on the dais.
I agree with everything you said. This is a very important project that through, unfortunately, many budget cycles over many years, when the executive branch asks to cut general obligation bonds, has come up on the chopping block. It goes way back to the carousel that's at Wheaton Regional Park, as you know. There's a commitment to move the carousel to Ovid Hazen Wells by the donor of the land. So I feel with this continuing to defer this project, we're not living up to a commitment that was made to Clarksburg decades and decades ago. And it is the park, you know, we have in Wheaton, we have Wheaton Regional Park, and Cabin John, we have Cabin John Regional Park. We do not have a park of that nature and caliber in Clarksburg or Germantown.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you, Madam President. So for well over a decade, I had a front row seat to the wonderful operation that is parks and the wonderful operation that is planning. And I want to begin by acknowledging you, Mr. Dreyfus. I've seen you up close and personal and had the opportunity to work with you on a variety of different projects, and just want to acknowledge your commitment and everything that you have done for this county. So thank you very much for your service, sir. I just wanted to highlight a few areas that you couldn't get to in your presentation, but I want to make sure are acknowledged because it's very important work. One is Parks' efforts to enhance accessibility to our disability community, well above and beyond what is required through laws and policy. You are doing a great job of ensuring that we're activating our parks and making them accessible of people of all abilities. And so I want to acknowledge that work and thank you for your leadership there. I also want to acknowledge the great work you're doing on public-private partnerships. There's a partnership in place with the Washington Capitals to redo some of our rinks in the county, and that shows real progression. I'm a big fan of public-private partnerships, and I think the Parks Department does it better than just about anybody. So keep doing that great work. And on behalf of my children, I want to thank you for the emphasis on playgrounds and making them accessible for children of all ages. Because you know, we've got an 11-year-old and a 2-year-old, and when we go to Kemp Mill Park, there is something for all 4 of my children. And so that, as a dad, I can tell you is really important. So keep up that as well. I did want to highlight a few recommendations moving forward, and these are items we've discussed personally, but for purposes of public input here. Several of us on the dais participate in the Nighttime Economy Task Force, and the Parks Department, I think, can play a very important role in making Montgomery more attractive to our millennial population. We're doing a lot of exciting things in the area of craft breweries, and I think there's a partnership to be had with DLC as we look at activating our parks, but to do it a little bit more intentionally. Our colleagues in Northern Virginia and DC have been doing this for quite some time. Howard County has a very successful Wine in the Parks event, and so I think there are opportunities there for us to enhance and put forward the recommendations from the Nighttime Economy Task Force that I think would be very helpful. Switching gears, there is a bike share program on the C&O Canal in which families can get a bike for free. They just sign a waiver and literally rent the bike at no cost. And I think for a variety of our families around Montgomery County, that would be an inexpensive and pretty great way of further activating our parks, particularly in the areas where we have done such a great job with trails. So, and also for families that don't have the ability to transport bicycles because they rely on public transportation. And so that would enhance accessibility in other ways to our park trails and other park amenities. And then the other thing that I think that we need to be especially aware of is what a wonderful opportunity is to have such a rapidly changing cultural and demographic shift in the county, we have a number of tennis facilities that are no longer accessed as much as they used to be. But we've got people playing futsal and soccer on these tennis courts, and I think we can be more intentional moving forward about conversions of amenities like that to acknowledge the shifting and changing use and interests of our community. And I know that we've had conversations, but I think we can accelerate that a little bit because it is sort of a low-cost way of further activating some of those parks, particularly in culturally rich communities with diverse communities.
We do have a formal project underway to assess all the courts, their utilization, and whether they're ripe to be converted to a more current high-demand use.
Awesome. That is really good news, and I want to support those efforts. And then finally, for now, I'm a big fan of splash parks, and so are my kids. And I've observed that DC has been adding splash park amenities, which have created destination parks. You have these fun areas, and we all know how hot we can get here in Montgomery County and how muggy things can be. And so families are always looking for inexpensive and fun ways to engage their families, and that's another way of us to be able to connect to the wonderful park amenities that we have here. So that's it for now, but keep up the great work, and I appreciate all of your efforts and the great presentation.
Thank you.
Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you so much. Really appreciated the comments from Councilmember Albornoz there. I wanted to also, just discuss briefly this idea of conversion or creation of these mini soccer courts. The idea is gaining a lot of momentum around the world, and what it does is when you have a concrete playing surface, it's a small surface with goals on each side. You can have pickup soccer games, 2-on-2, 3-on-3, and it in a way that is the ball bounces very predictably, and it's really good for skills development. And a lot of countries that are very serious about soccer are starting to really invest in this type of facility. We have a lot of soccer is wildly popular all over the county, but there's a lot of urbanized parts of the county where there just aren't sufficient playing fields, and when they're to the extent that they're used, they're constantly used. So where are you going to go if you're a kid and you want to sort of play a more pickup type game? And the opportunity to put these mini courts in, which are typically about the size of a tennis court, which isn't to say that converting tennis courts is the only way to go. It could be basketball courts, or it could be just space, parking lot space for, I don't know. But I think that there is a real need to create opportunities for kids to practice their skills. And I've said this before, I'm just going to keep saying, I really worry that the trend in sports is towards these leagues that are very expensive to participate in. Their travel, they require parents to be able to drive their kids for hours and hours every week. And like, how are you gonna do that if your parents can't take you there and they can't afford, the fees for these leagues? But that's where a lot of these sports leagues seem to be going. And there's so many kids in our communities who the opportunity to develop their skills and then to excel in high school and maybe even compete for scholarships is just kind of drifting away from them. And so this is a type of infrastructure or facility, I think, that can help them continue to have the opportunity to practice and to develop. And it can be useful for teams even if they have rainy days and they want to continue to be able to practice, because we're shutting down the fields necessarily because they're good fields. We want to protect them during the rain, but this is an option for soccer during the rain. So I'm pleased that you're doing a review. I know part of that review is this pickleball thing. Yes. I want to find out what that is. I understand it's popular.
It's tennis with a lower net and
it's tennis with a lower net
and a fatter ball.
And I'm sure it's awesome, and I'll replay it in about 30 years. But I want to make sure that that we're considering the needs of kids who may not be testifying and engaging in our processes. That's all I want to say about that. Other comment I make: I saw a petition on Facebook for a BMX park or a dirt, like a dirt bike park. to bring one to another part of the county. There's a spectacular one in Germantown. All the good stuff's in the up county, my friend, as you know. And what'd you say?
Except for
almost all the. I was just speaking about parks. There could be right. You should have a carousel. You're absolutely right. But there's a petition to create another one of these parks somewhere in a different part of the county because it's cool. So I took my kids to the Germantown one, and it was really fun. It was pretty awesome on Saturday morning, and then I spent the afternoon at Northwest Park golf course and hitting balls. So I spent 7 hours in the parks this Saturday. Really got a lot out of it. Thank you for, running such a world-class park system. And of course, when I checked Facebook all over it, there was somebody from Bethesda saying, why are our parks so terrible? DC's are so great, ours are terrible. And I was like, I don't know what to say anymore. Can't win. But we do need to get that Bethesda urban park done. And I think that was mentioned, and we're actually very close to delivering a spectacular park there paid for by new development, hopefully substantially in Bethesda. So anyway, thank you for what you're doing, and look forward to hearing more about can you just comment on the BMX, the dirt bike park? I think you're looking at it, is my understanding. But
I don't know if it's analogous to what you see in Germantown, but we have some plans in Fairland and East County to do something similar.
Okay. Oh yes, well I've seen that. Casey took me into the woods to see that. It's pretty intense. I don't know if that's really what we had. I don't know if that checks that box, but that is also a spectacular.
I think we've added some similar types of features at Cabin John, and that a lot of people don't know about. And also, I think we have an opportunity maybe in the lower Rock Creek where there's some people building illegal, jumps and features, and we've talked about trying to bring that into the system, make that official. But I think we can.
Yeah. Can you look into something? Just spread the love around.
Try to get it into the down county. Yeah.
Thanks.
Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Madam President. It seems you and I both were outdoors, as were many of us on Saturday. I don't know whether to thank you or Mother Nature for allowing us to go outside, but I was also outside with my four-legged friends, my little fur babies, Daisy and Percy, and we were at the Ellsworth Urban Dog Park, which in a former life as a civic leader in that community helped push for the creation of that park about 4 years ago or so. First of its kind in Montgomery County, and that type of amenity, as you noted, are being requested and demanded throughout the county. And I've read and heard some media reports in other jurisdictions where there is a tussle regarding limited park space, whether it is in already established parks, whether it is de facto parks near metro or in urban areas, or the conversion of other spaces for dog parks. And as the department is currently undergoing a study for the creation of more dog parks, can you elaborate on that criteria and how you're looking at it?
I'm probably not prepared really to get into the specific criteria, but with the site selection studies, we will develop a matrix of, certain size really matters, the amount of space you have to work with, population density, demographics, is it likely to disrupt nearby adjacent homes? A whole series of criteria will go into what makes a good site from a not so good site. And then of course, community input and need and desire gets factored in. So at the end of the day, we will come out with a ranking and we'll take that to the planning board where there will be more public input about our rankings. And then we will come to you through the budget cycle to seek the funds to build the dog parks.
Okay. Thank you for that. And I can follow up with staff to get some more.
Yeah,
I received some information about it, and I know there's a survey, and I know Councilmember Friedson has been talking about it as well. So I can follow up with all of you.
Thank you.
The second issue was jokingly referred to by my colleagues regarding access to parks, be it up county, down county, across the county. And this being the first semi-annual report, I want to take this as an opportunity to ask about access to the parks. And if we know how people get to their local parks, if it is walking or biking to a local park, if it's taking a vehicle to a regional park, or relying on public transportation where in some cases they might not be going to parks at all. Do we have any of that information, how our transportation network facilitates or hinders access?
One of the, we probably don't have enough. I'll acknowledge that. We probably don't study that closely enough. But I can say that one of the components of the Energized Public Spaces functional plans, one of the ways you solve community access to a park is through connectivity, which could be any of those modes. It could be transit, it could be walking, it could be removal of a barrier for a walkable or bikeable experience. I will circle back with my team and see the degree to which we have current data on the system as a whole, but I know going forward we're focused on how people get there.
Sure, and that's not within your purview, not within your department budget per se, but as we're talking about expanding access, expanding opportunities, culturally, socioeconomically, those programs don't help if people can't get there.
Right.
And so I'd love to work with you and my colleagues to figure out how we can get more people to the parks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Vice President Katz.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the presentation. And there is so much that we could applaud in Montgomery County, and this is certainly one of those areas. People many times take them for granted in the parks that we do, that the grass gets magically cut and everything is always just the way we want them to be. And of course, we all know that that's not the case. I do applaud that everybody's visiting the various parks, because that means there's a pride, and that also means that someone is looking to make certain that pride continues. And Casey, I certainly applaud you for visiting. I guess have you gotten to all of them now? Wow. So now you got to build some more just so you can have something to do. I mean, yeah. And of course, the whole thing for Vision Zero, it really, and the trails, and we've got to make certain that our pedestrians are safe and everybody else is safe, but especially our pedestrians. It's gotten to be something that literally can be happening every week, and we're concerned, and I know you are, and I applaud you doing that. The whole idea for the school fields, I really think is the great thing that you are doing. One of the great things that you're doing for so long, and the school fields were not something that we would applaud. I mean, they were just they weren't something that the school children would be safe during the day, and you certainly didn't believe that they were safe in the evening for the way that the field was. I mean, I remember that there would be rocks and everything else in the middle of these things, and I really believe that the experts, who are you all, should be involved, and I applaud the Board of Education and everyone else involved with that. They realize that there's somebody else that can do this in a great way. You know, we talked about pickleball, and of course, I'm not a pickleball player. My wife is a pickleball player, and I'll tell her about that 30-year comment, Mr. Reamer. But you know, I do thank you for keeping up with what people are wanting for the day. I mean, for the moment. And pickleball will, be here for as long as it is, just like tennis, just like golf, and then something else is going to take its place. And we need to make certain that our customers are getting what our customers need. And it should be for all ages, and we need to make certain that that's exactly what we're doing. And I know that is what you're trying to do. Mr. Dreyfus, we all thank you for everything that you've done. Your mark is certainly in Montgomery County, and you're certainly going to be. Hopefully, you will be here to remind us, but you're also going to be remembered for all that you've done. And I just wanted the last thing I want to talk about is the park police and Chief McSwain. You know, I've been to many awards programs over the years, and before the chief was chief, and certainly I look forward to being there when he is chief. But many times, you talk about something that gets overlooked. The park police, who do a lot of good work literally every day, and people don't even realize that they're there in some cases. That's, I guess in one case, that shows how good they are, but in another case, that shows how much that we need to continue to appreciate them. I know that the Chief McSwain is certainly working with the county police department. He certainly has many friends over there, but it was a great choice for you to make that Chief McSwain is there. And I think that we will all, because of he and all the men and women of that of the Parks Police Department, will make certain that our parks remain the safe places that we take for granted. Thank you.
Councilmember Joando.
Thank you, Council President, and good to see everybody, and thank you for the presentation. Mr. Dreyfus, thank you for your service. Please stick around at least half the year if you can. Especially as we head into the general plan and all that. I know you're going to be giving a presentation, so I'll hold on that. Also want to thank Chief McSwain, who I had the opportunity to get to know when I was right out of high school, serving as a AmeriCorps member with the 3rd District Montgomery County Police when he was then Lieutenant McSwain. And so it's just great to see you in the new capacity, and following Councilmember Katz, thank you for your service and all that you all do. Mike, I just wanted to ask you 2 things related to the activations, and so glad we have our new lead of activations on board. And do you have, I saw there was a little diagram. Are you going to send out like do you have a full kind of plan of what you're planning? I saw something that was like referred to up and coming, and I just really am interested in working with you, let me state that, on how we build out these activations, because I think they can be great ways, to Councilmember Glass's point, of getting new people to and excited and in the parks. And so I just would love to work with you, and then know if you could give me like what's the next year going to look like, and allow us to give some comments and feedback on that.
Thank you, and I really appreciate that offer. Obviously, there are some events that are planned with dates and locations. We'll make sure we're getting those out, and that it's evolving. On activation, several of you have made comments that are really excellent. The partnering with other entities is one of the big opportunities. I really believe that because we have been conservative for decades about what we have allowed to happen in the parks, largely because there was a sentiment that if you do something overly ambitious in a park, the community that's around it might not like it. We're in a new day. Our parks are for people to come into and enjoy and recreate in. So I think the partners out there, what we're trying to send the message is, if you have a great idea, come to us. We'll come to you too. But please, if you're out there and you think parks are off limits, come talk to us, because maybe that is the perfect venue for your event.
I think that's exactly right. And because, as you know, there's kind of this unspoken cultural bias with parks over the years where, I know when I was growing up, you didn't necessarily think you were to go to the parks. They were more serene. That culture has changed, and I think rightly so, that more people from all communities, the parks are there for you to utilize and have fun and be a part of. And I think the activation component is, I want to recognize that you guys are focusing on that, but that's a critical part to continuing to open them up. So I agree with that 100%. I've spoken to you last time you were here about the need to, you guys are the experts on maintaining fields and making them better. And we spoke about the White Oak Recreation Center, which I know is a rec department field, but I continue to want to make sure you have the resources to use and to give expertise to help maintain and rehabilitate many of these fields that our kids need. So I just want to state that again, and I know we'll talk more about that. Also concerned about your budget, and I'm glad I'm on Fed, and we'll be taking that up. And I agree with all the things that you have planned to do. We will need to make sure you have what you need to do your job. So I'll be looking forward to working with you to do that.
Thank you.
All right, well, I don't see any other lights. This has been a really awesome presentation. We look forward to working with you. Obviously, we will be, very busy deliberating on the budget and trying to address some priorities that the council has always had that obviously were not included in the budget transmittal, but, that will be part of the usual process. But I really do appreciate everything you're doing, and happy that everybody gets to enjoy these amazing parks. So
thank you.
With that, I believe that we are finished with this item. Are we? No. We have another item. That's right, we're halfway.
We have a presentation for planning.
Yeah, more than halfway.
This is always the hard thing is to come after a fantastic
Yeah.
presentation like the one that that Mike just did, and it is a absolute pleasure to work with Mike and his staff in parks. You know, planning of parks have a lot of intersections. There's a lot of things that we do together, and it is a pleasure. But let's quickly go through some of our slides, and then I'm mainly interested in hearing your thoughts and comments. So one of the major projects that we have planned for the next 2 years is the general plan update. And as you all know, we have not comprehensively looked at our general plan in over 50 years. And we are clearly a very different community than we were in 1964. And we think now is the time to really say, what's next? We've had a very busy time since about 2013. We've completed 19 different plans with the Veers Mill and the Mark Rail community plans, which are coming to an end. And we're in a sort of significant implementation period. But that's a great time to also, while we're implementing these 19 plans, to step back and sort of take a look at the big picture. We think that it's important, and we want to make sure that it's something that we are working closely with the council on, and that it's not going to be simply something that the planning department sort of comes up with in a vacuum, but that we're working with you all from the get-go, working with your individual districts and with the whole countywide outreach effort. Next. What we've done is sort of looked at a plan for doing the general plan, and we've talked about the overall strategic framework. Our previous general plan looked at some big picture issues and had some great outcomes. Affordable housing was considered very important, and the MPDU program came out of that. Preservation of open space was important in 1964, and the TDR program in our Ag Reserve came out of that. Balancing infrastructure was viewed as very important, and our adequate public facilities ordinance came out of that. So I think, again, the general plan is important at figuring out what are the important trends, what are the drivers that are going to be affecting those goals, those trends, and what are the actions that we should take to respond to those drivers. And so we've sort of focused on 3 major goal areas: economic health, community equity, environmental resilience. And as part of this general plan process, we want to take a look at the drivers that are affecting or changing in some way each of those goals, and talk about what actions we need to do in response so that we can really maintain, not just maintain equilibrium actually, but go beyond that and really thrive as a county. We don't want to simply just sort of maintain the status quo. We want to go beyond and go for excellence so that we are really a thriving community. Next. In economic health, I do want to say, again, we are working on many of these kinds of goals on a daily basis. The plans that we do really help drive a lot of the economic health of the county. We have finished a lot of plans, as I mentioned, but we have more coming up in addition to the general plan that you're going to be seeing in the next couple of years. The Forest Glen Montgomery Hills Sector Plan, Shady Grove Sector Plan, Minor Master Plan Amendment, the Germantown Plan for the Town Sector Zone, which is more of a technical kind of exercise, the Ashton Plan, and then actually the construction of our Wheaton headquarters, which is well underway, is an economic action in and of itself, because we think it's going to be an important centerpiece in the overall revitalization of downtown Wheaton. We're working on design guidelines, and we're working on placemaking, and I want to explain a little bit that Parks is very, very active and successful in doing activities to activate their parks. Where we see placemaking having a sort of intersecting goal is looking at ways that we can do placemaking activities that help implement plans that are not on parkland, but that help us implement some of the goals in our plans. And the project that we did last fall at Randolph Hills was part of implementing the White Flint 2 sector plan that was done. We are looking at some work in Silver Spring, some work in Long Branch, and Up County, most likely in Burtonsville. All of these are placemaking activities, not on parkland, but that serve as an effort to implement and realize the vision of some of the plans that you all have approved. Next. I also want to emphasize that, part of our sort of implementation period for these 19 plans that we've approved since 2013 involves the regulatory process and new development. And I think you're all very aware of the cranes and the new buildings in downtown Bethesda and downtown Silver Spring. But I want to tell you, we have activity going on in many parts of the county. Not only places like Chevy Chase Lake, which is the Lindley project that you see in the lower left, but also Up County in Germantown, Clarksburg, Great Seneca Science Corridor. We are fortunate that we've actually had 2 new employment projects. One, the Autolus project, which is the middle of the lower section in Great Seneca Science Corridor, and that is a new employer coming into the county from outside of this region. It's not just moving folks around from one place to another. And the Viasat project, which is in the Germantown employment corridor. Those are new office buildings that are being built in the Up County, and that is important. We have great projects that are planned and will soon be under construction in places like Kensington, Rock Spring, White Flint, Grosvenor, Westbard, and Clarksburg. So there is a lot of really, really positive development activity taking place that is an implementation, again, of these plans that have been done in the last few years. Next. We're very focused on community equity, which is another major goal area for the general plan. We have been, as you know, very involved with Vision Zero efforts in a number of our recent plans, from the bicycle plan to Veers Mill to Mark Rail. We're doing the Aspen Hill Vision Zero study, and Vision Zero will also be a part of the Forest Glen Montgomery Hills sector plan. We are interested in housing choice, whether it be accessory dwelling units or hopefully missing middle housing that you'll be hearing more about. We're working in historic preservation for new signage with Councilmember Hucker's office for a number of our historic African American communities. And we are working very diligently on new ways to engage underrepresented communities. And I think we've made progress there, but we've never finished that. We've never done enough. We have to keep working on every plan and every study we do. Next. In terms of environmental resilience, one of the things we're doing in our forest conservation program that you'll be hearing about is we're really pulling together all of the programs that we do to do tree plantings in stream buffers. We've done several projects in parks with our colleagues in parks using fee in lieu and penalty money that has come in through the forest conservation program. But now we're going to actually begin working with other community members, private nonprofits, to identify privately owned sites where we can also do replanting of stream buffers. And we have a pilot project. We're working with the Montgomery Countryside Alliance on a project in the Ag Reserve to do tree planting on private land. And we are also working on our Shades of Green and other tree planting programs in our more down county areas. We've been closely monitoring, I think you know, the I-495, I-270 managed lane study, and I thank Carol Rubin for her work on that. And in historic preservation, we have been implementing a directive that you all gave us to really look at our burial sites inventory and to integrate the review of burial sites into our regulatory program. So at that point, I think I'd like to introduce Brian Crane and ask Brian to come up. Brian is a new employee that you all approved, who he is a professional archaeologist with many, many years of experience in many forms of archaeology, but particularly in understanding the archaeology of burial sites. He's been working since he arrived about 6 months or so ago on updating our inventory, and he's been working closely with a group of citizen volunteers who have enabled us to go back throughout the county and look at burial site locations and to begin mapping them. So I'm going to turn it over to Brian.
Thank you, and good morning. So what you see on the screen right now is the current draft of the burial sites inventory. This evolved over multiple years. The first efforts to inventory all our burial sites and cemeteries began in 2004, progressed to about 2010, and produced a draft inventory of about 260 some locations. Subsequent to you all passing 2 new ordinances requiring the planning department to create and maintain an inventory and then integrate review of these during the preliminary plan of subdivision process, volunteers with Montgomery Preservation Incorporated made a really massive effort to physically go around to as many of the cemeteries and burial sites as possible to get more reliable phone GPS locations, to take standardized photographs, fill out a descriptive form, and to conduct additional historical research to identify additional burial sites that were suspected to exist, but about which we didn't have enough information to map. So what you see here is the end result of that process. There are currently 314 locations in the burial sites inventory. These include mostly sites that are known. So you'll notice that there are 2 colors of markers on the maps. We have green ones and we have a smaller number of clear ones. The green ones are locations that we know exist. Either there's physical evidence of the cemetery still, or there's very, very precise historical information, a map or historical photographs or other documentation that shows exactly where the cemetery is. The other 73 are sites that we know existed from historical records. We have enough information to give an approximate location, but we don't know yet exactly where they are. This is a component of MC Atlas. It can be accessed either through the Historic Preservation website or through the general MC Atlas portal. So just to go through a few features of the application, if you click on the information, you get a little bit of background about the project and some explanation about what the different symbols are. It can be searched by location, so you can enter an address or your own address or an address of a town, and the map will zoom to that location. And I'll give this a moment to resolve a little bit better. If you click on an individual point, a a tab will open with additional information about that specific cemetery or burial site. We'll give its name, some date information if we have it. And at the top, there will be links to 2 forms that have been created over the years by volunteers. So the first one is the original survey form. It's limited information, but that's what was created between 2004 and 2010. Then there's what the Montgomery Preservation Incorporated did this past year. So it's a much more detailed form that includes some descriptive information, some information about the number of headstones, if there are any. There'll be some maps and perhaps an aerial, and then a number of standardized photographs that show what the site looks like today. And here at the bottom, this tab pulls up and will show, give you a list of all of the burial sites that are shown in the current view. So, for example, if you know the name of a cemetery or burial site that you're trying to find but don't know where it is, you can search for it by name, or you can search by location or address. I think that's most of what I wanted to show. I'll just further add that we have drafted guidelines for implementing the inventory and review under preliminary plan process. We have briefed the planning board on those and have begun a series of public meetings. We had the first last week at the planning department. We have another this coming Saturday at the Germantown Public Library and another the following Thursday at the Olney Public Library. And we sent out letters to property owners informing them that they have a cemetery on their property and giving them an opportunity to come to these meetings, ask questions, or raise whatever concerns they may have. Thank you.
So, again, I thank Brian and our historic preservation supervisor, Rebecca Ballo. I think this is a good example of when you all have created a policy or created a new law, how we have proceeded to implement it and hopefully make it an important part of our development review process. To close, I just wanted to mention that our work is being recognized outside of the county. We have gotten 2 awards from the National Capital Area chapter of the APA for the Bethesda Downtown Plan. It was selected as the outstanding plan in 2018. And then we also got the Harold Foster Award for Community Outreach and Engagement for the Veers Mill Corridor Master Plan. In addition, our Bicycle Master Plan was selected as the Bicyclist Choice Award for the Best Improvement in Maryland by the Washington Area Bicyclists Association. And I will mention that we are in a week or so, a number of us are departing for San Francisco to the National APA Conference. 5 sessions from our department were accepted. And again, it's very competitive to actually have a session accepted at the APA. And so we were very, very proud that 5 of our sessions were accepted, and they are in things as varied as the bicycle plan, parking lots to places, and Vision Zero. So we're excited to share what's going on in the county with a national audience. We have our schedule, and it's also in the, I think, booklet that hopefully you all received at the end. And as Councilmember Reamer mentioned, we'll be talking about the schedule in more detail with the Fed committee and as part of the budget process, but would love to hear your thoughts and guidance at this time.
And if you wouldn't mind, I just wanted to give Commissioner Sushi and Commissioner Patterson a chance to get a word in if they would like.
Please press the button.
Yep, gotcha.
Thank you.
All right. Appreciate the opportunity to serve on the planning board. I've enjoyed working with Casey, Gwen, and Mike. They've got a terrific staff that supports them. I just want to mention a little bit on Norman. The thing that impressed me, because he knows the do's and don'ts of developers, and that's a good protection for the commission. He's also worked on the headquarters in Wheaton, and then also he's been active in affordable housing, I think, which is very important to the county. So I just want to mention that. We also, the newer members, I've worked in transportation since I was 17. I was director of transportation from 79 to 84. So that tends to be my bias. I did want to comment. I thought I maybe got some good news from Carol that I've been pushing to make 270 multimodal. It started out that way many, many years ago. And we have had, and I know we have a corridor cities, that's kind of morphed, but I think that would be one aspect to put that transit element in there. If you look at what happened over in Virginia, sometimes we tend to be more multimodal. VDOT, has acted to support transit. Their P3, they're getting $100 million to do transit. When you look at the extension, and I worked on a study for VDOT, made the case to take Metro to Loudoun County. There again, toll revenues from the Dulles Toll Road went into supporting part of that extension of Metro. So to me, that's an opportunity. When you look at what we've defined in the corridor, for the corridor cities transitway, I think that's been going on for 20, 22, 23 years at this point. They've been calling it a multimodal study, but there's elements in there, a park and ride lot and an interchange. All of that could be part of the P3. There's a bridge that connects to basically a Century Boulevard, and then it runs down either through the Federal Energy or it runs down Middlebrook. It runs parallel to 270. So if you're doing work on 270, it takes it down to the Watkins Mill interchange. It goes down Quince Orchard. It goes down the median of Great Seneca Highway. All of those were planned to be identified as areas for the Corridor Cities Transitway. There's also an overpass over the Shady Grove interchange. All of that could be incorporated in the design and could be an early breakout project. Again, perhaps not operating the transit as a purple, but just getting those elements that are key to the corridor from transit support. Again, even purchasing buses would be possible. What would it do? I asked that question several years ago under the Ehrlich administration. We tried a P3, and they said, yeah, it would add 10, 15 years to the concession. And again, when you do a P3, sometimes the state doesn't want it back unless it really is a moneymaker. So there's options to do that. So I think that's very important. The other comment I would make, again, when I was director, with the support of the county exec and the council, I reorganized the department in 5 months. We set up a transit division. We took Ride-On out of the planning office. We set up a division. We also set up, took bus maintenance out of highway maintenance. We set up a division to maintain police cars separately, equipment, and then also the buses. So again, I've been involved in the transit. I have a patent on a BRT, been involved in BRT. But again, sometimes I think we're competing against each other in our bus support programs. When you look at the 29 corridor, we have MTA running their commuter buses with a stop at Burtonsville. We have Metro bus on there. We have Ride-On bus on there. So I think we need to look at the transit that we have, maybe optimizing some of the buses. There's articulated buses that Metro runs on Veers Mill Road and other places. So I think need to take a look at that, optimizing our investment in transit. Again, I appreciate the opportunity here, serve on this commission, and obviously from time to time I like to raise issues on transportation. So thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you so much for your service. Ms. Patterson.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. As the newest member of the current configuration of the Planning Board, I want to extend congratulations to council members Albornoz, Glass, Jawando, as well as Friedson. I hope that your onboarding process has been as easy as mine has been as a result of the planning staff and the park staff bringing me up to speed on many of the topics that you're seeing presented to you today. Now that the elections are behind us, I'm hoping that we can have a more robust discussion about some of the things that Director Wright has presented, and that's related to infrastructure. We've got great design in place for many of the buildings that we see throughout the county, but we need to have a deeper discussion regarding the infrastructure in particular. And I'm going to talk specifically about sidewalks. For those of us that are in Districts 4, 5, and 2, and as well as some parts of District 1, you know that your constituents may be walking along roadways that have no sidewalks. I had a conversation recently with a woman in District 2. She's actually in Clarksburg. She's been asking for a sidewalk for 5 years. 5 years. And she's got children in the community that walk along this road. I think we have to have a discussion about how we can either redirect funding or get funding from other agencies to help support these efforts. We all support Vision Zero, but how do we implement the immediate needs? I'm going to move on to another area that is near and dear to me, and that's transportation. My colleague has talked a lot about multimodal, but I happened to have a conversation with Councilmember Glass, and he asked me shortly after he onboarded what was my commute like, and I shared with him that when I have a planning board meeting every Thursday, I have to be out the door no later than 7:15 for a 9 a.m. meeting. I invited him, and I invite all of you. Councilmember Rice, you already know the drill, so you don't have to. But I invite all of you, if you want to find out what the commute is like, show up at my house by 7:15 in the morning. We'll commute down in my car so you can see what 270 is like. If you prefer to take public transportation, we'll need to leave a little bit earlier because we're going to have to catch 2 or 3 buses to get to Shady Grove Metro. Again, we need to talk about the infrastructure. Regardless of where we are in the county, for those of us who are in, and I mentioned specific districts, we've got to address this. We want people to stay, work, and play in the county. This is the way to do it. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you so much. I think all the districts have those issues, so it is countywide.
Be stronger out and be
Yeah.
that. So I support our efforts, including the effort on Vision Zero. That's certainly
Excellent.
important.
Thank you so much for your service. Okay, we do have some lights. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Council President, and thank you all for your very insightful and helpful remarks. And thank you, Gwen. I'm going to start with Gwen, and I'll work my way down. I just have a couple questions. The general plan update, I was struck by, and I was so appreciative that you included the old, I don't know if it's metro or monorail or, some combination therein, with the Silver Spring on the front from the 64 general plan, 55 years ago, hard to believe. And I know when I was running and obviously grew up here, been here my whole life, I've often said in many ways Montgomery County is still updating from its 55-year-ago self. And we've got a lot to do, whether it's putting sidewalks in communities that were farmland and now have thousands of people up county and other places, or making transit more accessible and not having some bus stops that you can't get to. They're just there, and I'm thinking on the worst one in America on Colesville Road and across from Trader Joe's, where you just have to pray that you can fly and levitate over to it and not get hit. And so we've got a lot of needs and a lot of updating to do, and I think I'm really excited to be on the council at a time when we're going to be taking up the general plan and can do so in a thoughtful way, complementing what I think are some great strides that the planning department has made with other plans, including Vision Zero and more multimodal options. I wanted to ask you about the timing. So I noticed in the remarks that you said if it goes along the way you're suspecting, it wouldn't get to us until 2022. Is that
No.
how I'm reading it? Okay.
We would, the schedule
2021.
that we currently have would transmit it in about June of 2021.
Okay.
We have been looking, because we know some folks have said, can you do it faster? That's a little too long. We think we could bump it a couple of months so that you would get it in the spring instead of the summer of 2021. But in order to do as much outreach and analysis, we want to give you something that comes forward that is well baked, not fully baked, because you all like to add a lot, and that's appropriate, but we want to give you something that's well baked. And so we are looking at different schedules. I think it may be possible to do something where we would deliver it in the spring of 2021.
Okay. Well, I would just strongly encourage that. I think that would be ideal from my perspective. Obviously, we have some of our colleagues, even though we just had an election, at that time we'll be getting ready to have another. And I think it would be important to have the input and buy-in from council members that might not be here after that election. And so for that reason, among many others, I'd like to have it earlier. That's just my opinion. And because I think people are interested. That being said, the outreach is important, and we'll be in conversation with you, obviously, as we go along. And I'd love to know more about how you, as you're building out the community engagement, I'm hoping we can participate and come and be a part of those and maybe do some together.
Yeah, absolutely. We really want the council to be involved in this effort from the get-go, not to simply let us work on it and then we sort of give it to you and you see it for the first time. We want you to be involved from the beginning.
Great. And so one other question with the obviously affordable housing and placemaking, both important. You mentioned Long Branch. As you know, that's where I grew up, and one of the things when we're talking about the placemaking and I have these competing concerns, as I think many of us do, of how do we maintain the cultural vitality and businesses that are in the area when we and highlight those, right? And Long Branch is a place that has some great local restaurants and other businesses. And then at the same time, make sure that they remain affordable, these places. And so, I saw on here you have an affordable housing preservation and redevelopment feasibility, which looks like it's going to take place between kind of now and next year. And could you talk to me about how you envision that in light of the work that you also want to do to preserve community value of ethnically diverse retail centers, which you also have in here? Could you just talk about how you're thinking about that and what that's going to look like?
Sure. The affordable housing study was one that was recommended as an outcome of the rental housing study, and it was to look at the most at-risk market rate affordable apartments in the county, and to do an inventory of those and to understand, again, what strategies may be used to both preserve those market rate affordable units, but also produce some new units that will complement them. It's very, very in line with the conversations we've been having through the Veers Mill corridor plan. That's a great, in a way, introduction to the topic. What we really, I think, are intending with this effort is to look at that a little bit more county-wide. In terms of the retail, again, we have done a retail study, and that study, I think, emphasized that we have an incredible diversity of different retail types in the county, but one important retail type is our ethnic mom and pop kinds of shops. And we want to work closely with the National Center for Smart Growth at the University of Maryland that is working on some Purple Line corridor planning to talk about that in relation to how we can support retail uses along the Purple Line. So that is an effort that, again, we think is important. We are also in the same boat as parks and are not, at least in the executive's budget, funded to do all the things that we hoped to do in fiscal year 20. And so when we talk to you about the budget and the reconciliation list, we're trying to think about other ways to accomplish some of these same efforts, possibly without the exact amount of funding we had hoped for.
Well, I appreciate you sliding that in there, and we'll certainly be considering that. It's a big concern. You know, there was a store on University Boulevard, Fabrics and Notions, which is where I got my children's clothing that I wore, the Nigerian traditional clothing that they wore at our inauguration. It was there. She had to move. She couldn't afford to stay in that neighborhood just because of impending. There's already some jacking of prices coming up with people thinking that the purple line is coming through. So it's a concern, and she's been there 20 years, and we lost her to Prince George's County. So I just think we all need to be intentional. It's one of many examples, and so I'm glad you're focusing on this, and it's certainly a priority for me. And then just quickly to our commissioners, I couldn't agree more with the need to focus on infrastructure and prioritize transit. We obviously all have been pushing on the State Highway Administration in this PT process to include transit as a major priority. I saw, I know Councilmember Katz just stepped away, but I saw the monorail presentation that many of my colleagues have seen, and it is pretty amazing. And I think that's one of many things that we should look at, and I know you all have seen it as well. And so I'm excited about the opportunity to do that. And to Ms. Patterson, I take what you're saying completely at face value, and it's in my neighborhood. We had to fight to get a sidewalk a few years ago, and it was a 15-year process. We need to focus on, that's part of Vision Zero. That's part of making sure people can get to and fro and access transit and get around their communities. So I appreciate you making that point. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well made. The businesses in Langley Park, that was issued with MTA, the Maryland Transit Administration, preserving those businesses as the purple line went through, and also on Piney Branch. And it just also, in my past role, I was the project manager on the maglev from Baltimore to Washington. We did a final EIS, but the federal government didn't want to accept it, and Maryland didn't want to submit it, but it was to connect the two cities. So it just takes so long on these projects, and I think I find most frustrating, just the time it takes to develop them and implement them, and years seem to go by, and what it does, it just drives up the cost. Again, the comment on 270, I think it would be more supportive of the community if there was that transit element in there. I mean, to be determined, but I think it makes the project more acceptable to the community.
Thank you. I do want to do a time check. The council has a lunch at 12:30 with the retiree employees, so our time it's kind of limited. So I would really ask my colleagues to keep the questions short and the responses. I want to also remind us that on April 24th, the Fed Committee will have its session on the park and planning budget, and I'm sure if there are questions also that, council members want to submit, can do so as well. Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you. Yes, I'll try to be very brief. I really am concerned about the general plan and how we approach it. I think we need to think strategically about it, possibly break it up into pieces. I'm very concerned that if there was a delay in receiving the plan according to the current schedule, that it would become too late to do anything with it. And then that would have been a pretty significant lost opportunity of planning work for years for the preceding years. So I think we need to put more thought into that. And I also would like to see more plans in the queue. I think there's a lot of opportunities. We just did a terrific corridor plan for Vision Zero in the Veers Mill corridor. Are there other corridors that we could do? Could we do all the corridors or a large selection of them as one? Downtown Silver Spring is a plan we've talked about in the past. There's so many opportunities. I think we ought to just, think creatively and see how to fit everything into the timeline.
Well, yeah, we want to talk to you during the budget about that, and I, speaking for myself, would think that at least doing part of downtown Silver Spring would be one addition we should consider.
Thanks.
Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you, Madam President. I will also try to be brief, and I share some of the same concerns about the timeline, not just of the general plan, but of some of the master plans that are coming through. And delays are natural, but staff has raised some legitimate concerns, and I hope that we can really dive into specifically the timeline of moving forward for the next several years. And how we foresee this working vis-a-vis the general plan update, I think would be really helpful. Did just want to thank you. I think the 3 policy area goals that you've set out, community equity, economic health, and environmental resilience are, I think that is a good framework with which to adapt this. And I think you're right that we are the community that we are largely because of the general plan and the 1964 general plan. We still are living in a community that looks a heck of a lot like what we set out to build and create. And so this is not a light issue. This is not a small policy conversation. This is absolutely at the heart of what type of community we want to grow and build together. And so I hope that we can do that. So thanking you for all of your work on placemaking, affordable housing, and building sustainable communities. I do have a quick question. I'll save the rest of my questions for committee. But I've received a few questions about the status of the amenity fund that was part of the Bethesda downtown plan. It's my understanding that this is a fund that is largely paid for by fees in lieu of, payments in lieu of, and just wanted to get an update on that, making sure that the idea of this was that these, like the PIP, be dedicated specifically to quality of life infrastructure, amenities for the local community affected by the construction that you talked about, the cranes that we hear a lot about, and just wondering if we could get an update on that and if we could foresee a staff update in writing coming forward at some point.
Sure, we can certainly give you that. We do have an amenity fund in Bethesda, and there has been one contribution to it. So it's pretty clear the amount of money we have in the fund because there's only been one contribution to it. And that was relatively recently through the ZOM project on Arlington Road. But we can certainly give you an update on that. In terms of the PIP, the park impact payment, again, we are expecting additional funds to be delivered into that, but we have thus far, as I understand it, gotten one check. And it's a big check, but we only gotten one check so far.
It would be helpful, just like the PIP for the plan, if we had the money, where the money would go, and what the thought process, at least from planning, just like we have we're getting an update of what the thought process from parks and, perhaps specifically on the amenity fund, just like the PIP, we can take that up specifically at the Fed committee.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Hucker.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm sure everything's been said, but real quickly, I just want to thank you, Gwen. It's been really a pleasure to work with you and Rebecca on the African American Heritage Markers. The input's been fantastic. Rebecca in particular has put in an enormous amount of time, and I really look forward to the next steps on that. Tina, I totally agree with you, of course, on the need for enhanced transit, especially in the Up-County. I do want to let you know, if you hadn't been paying attention, that in the recent decision of the Metro Board on operating hours and extended hours versus maintenance hours, we were able, and our Maryland board members were able to prevail over DC's position. DC at one point had suggested starting later in Shady Grove, which would force thousands, an incredible amount of Up-County residents. I was shocked by the number that our staff came up with, but thousands of Montgomery County residents into their cars, onto roads in Montgomery County and DC rather than getting on at Shady Grove.
I did see it. Thank
Good.
you.
Good. So anyway, we're making a little progress on Metro there, and we had, of course, the recent related victory on the ending the Silver Spring Turnback there. And Jerry, I wanted to make sure, if you hadn't seen the letter that the whole council and county executive sent to Pete Ron, yes, about the Beltway expansion plan. But that in particular, we called for BRT on the Beltway. And we all know we need many new, sorry, I'm getting scammed, likely calling me again. Many more transit options to Virginia, particularly a marked connection to VRE, as well as enhanced Metro and BRT on the Beltway. So would love to talk to you more about that, including addressing increasing efficiency of our bus routes in light of Metro bus restructuring that's proposed. Thanks.
Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Madam President. Because of the time, I'll just ask one question, and it's regarding your current work schedule, and it is regarding the work that, according to the timeline, is already underway regarding the Montgomery Hills and Forest Glen sector plan. There's a lot going on in that community. Not only negotiations with SHA and MCDOT about making that a more pedestrian-friendly thoroughfare for residents and multimodal transit users, but we also have the specter of 495 expansion. So can you elaborate a little bit about how that unknown factor is, I'll use the word, inhibiting or delaying some of your work?
Thank you. The Montgomery Hills Forest Glen plan is really, the centerpiece of it is a lot of infrastructure improvements and changes, and including the SHA work on Georgia Avenue, but also what could come from the Managed Lanes project. And it is leaving some question marks. I think that we are working to the best of our ability to produce a plan that will end up creating and enhancing the existing, creating some great community opportunities and enhancing the existing community. But I think the plan will have to sort of have a multi-pronged kind of set of recommendations depending on the Managed Lanes project, because it would have a very big impact. It would be of great concern.
Okay, well, follow up, thank you.
All right. Well, I don't see any other lights. I really do appreciate everybody's questions and all the information. And as I said earlier, the Fed Committee will start its deliberations on the Park and Planning operating budget request on April 24th. So stay tuned, participate. And for that, we are adjourned. And at 12:30, we will be at the lunch with our retirees. Thank you. This is a public hearing on a special appropriation to the Montgomery County Public Schools FY19 capital budget in the amount of $5 million for relocatable classrooms. Action is tentatively scheduled for Monday, April 8th. Persons wishing to submit additional material for the council's consideration should do so before the close of business today. For this item number 6, there are no speakers, so this public hearing is closed. Item number 7 is a public hearing on an amendment to the FY19 to 24 Capital Improvements Program and transfer of unexpended project balances within the FY19 capital budget for MCPS in the amount of $7,500,000. This amount consists of $2,500,000 from plant life cycle asset replacement, $2 million from the restroom renovations, and $3 million from roof replacement. An Education and Culture Committee work session is tentatively scheduled for Friday, April 12th. Persons wishing to submit additional material for the council's consideration should do so before the close of business, April 8th. There are no speakers for this public hearing, so this public hearing is closed. Item number 8 is a public hearing on amendment to the FY19 to 24 CIP and transfer of unexpended project balances within the MCPS FY19 capital budget. The transfer is from the MCPS local unliquidated surplus account in the amount of $7,500,000 to current revitalizations and expansions. An Education and Culture Committee work session is tentatively scheduled for Friday, April 12th. Persons wishing to submit additional material for the council's consideration should do so before the close of business, April 8th. There are no speakers for this public hearing, so this public hearing is now closed. And that ends our public hearings for this afternoon. Okay. So we are going to proceed to the Charter Review Commission interviews. We have 2 panels for this interview process, and really do appreciate everyone that submitted their name for this particular commission. We will begin with a first panel, Mr. Christopher Danley, Larry Lauer, Deborah Chauveau, and David Hill. If you can please approach the table. Before we get started, let me just briefly say that the county charter was amended in 1976 to provide that a charter review commission be appointed by the county council every 4 years to study the charter. The commission researches and evaluates charter issues raised by the county executive, county council, and other government officials and the public. Commission reports are submitted no later than May 1st of every even-numbered year. These reports contain recommendations concerning any proposed charter amendments. The commission is composed of 11 county residents, 5 of whom will be appointed from a list of names submitted by the county executive, and applicants applying to the council for appointment may also be considered for nomination by the county executive. No more than 6 members of the commission may be from the same political party, and each member must be a resident of Montgomery County. Members serve 4-year terms, and the positions can be filled by a Democrat, a Republican, a voter who declines to affiliate with a party, or a member of another party officially recognized by the Montgomery County Board of Elections. Also, the chair is designated by the council, and the vice chair is designated by the county executive. So I do have some prepared questions that I will ask each of you, and then we can go by one for your answers. And then afterwards, if my colleagues have any questions or comments, we will entertain those as well. So we'll begin. First question, briefly discuss why you are interested in serving on the Charter Review Commission and explain what in your background will assist you in this role. And we'll begin on this side, and I can't read the names either because I have no, Mr. Danley. And there is a button at the base of the microphone. There you go, thank you.
Thank you, President Navarro. I appreciate the question. Thank you to the council for giving us the opportunity to participate on the commission and in the interviews. As to your question, I'm a proud member of my community. I live in Chevy Chase, and I was looking for opportunities for civic engagement, and I thought being a part of the commission would be a great way to give back to the community. And as for experience, I'm an attorney. As part of my job, I routinely analyze language and documents, and I would think that experience would assist me in reviewing the charter as a member of the commission. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ms. Chauveau.
Hi, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to come and be interviewed for the Charter Commission. My name is Deborah Chauveau. I have lived in Montgomery County for 15 years now. I migrated here from Democratic Republic of Congo, lived in Prince George's County, and my parents moved us to Montgomery County because they believed that we would have a better education and better opportunities for the future. I went to the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. I did political science and history. While taking political science, I took a few policy classes that struck a chord in me in wanting to be part of change making. I started off by doing internships for different campaigns, Van Hollen's campaign, and I got hands-on experience, which motivated me to participate even more in the county and wanting to learn, wanting to contribute to my community. And so I feel like being part of the Charter Commission will give me that opportunity, not just to be able to participate, to learn, but also bring a different perspective from an immigrant from the Congo that has lived in Montgomery County for 15 years. And I've worked for nonprofit. I've advocated for different type of issues such as environmental issues, military issues, and I feel like the experience that I've had in school, the knowledge that I've gained from school, the knowledge that I've gained from work qualifies me to be part of the Charter Commission.
Thank you. Mr. Hill.
Good afternoon, President Navarro, Navarro Council members. Again, I thank you, as others have, for the opportunity. I am interested in the Charter Review Commission for a few reasons. One, looking for an opportunity to continue and extend my civic engagement in Montgomery County. I've been a county resident for 29 years, have been active in a number of different fronts, organizations throughout the county during that time. Feel like we're at a critical point in time in Montgomery County, and I want to be part of that, and I think the Charter Review Commission is a way to do that. Background as an attorney, as well as, and I, like my prior individual, big part of my past has been involved in, is involved in reviewing documents, but also in terms of playing a role in convening the public, because part of it, what comes before the commission, as I understand it, are issues raised not just by you all, the executive, other government officials, but also the public. And so I do think that my experience is not just as an attorney, but on behalf of other organizations would help me to fulfill the role on the Charter Review Commission. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lauer.
Good afternoon. My name is Larry Lauer. Thank you very much for inviting us to come to speak to you regarding the Charter Review Committee. I'm applying for reappointment. I was on the Charter Review Committee at the last session. In my letter, I said that it gave me a good introduction into the county charter, which has a lot of nuances in there. We were a very active group last year. I believe the last 4 years, I think there was 4 charter amendments passed by the voters, recommended and passed by the voters. And I'd like to continue with that, since I was very familiar with that and worked with Paul Bessel, was the chair from the last one, very closely. And the charter review process itself is just a very interesting and democratic approach to making sure that the charter remains an active and viable document that changes with the county as the county changes. We've seen changes over the years, and I think it's a very good institution to continue, and I would like to contribute to that with my experience from last time. And I've been living in the county all my life, so I was here when there were county managers, not even county councils. So anyway, it's nice to be able to work on that and to appreciate the changes that can come from that. Thank you.
Thank you. Second question, what do you see as the most important issues facing the commission? We'll start again with you.
Thank you, President Navarro. As a first step, if I was approved to be on the commission, I would review the charter for any inconsistency, any ambiguity. If I found such language, I would meet and confer with other members of the commission to see if they agreed, and if there was on a proposed language we could put forward to see if we could fix those issues. That would be what I would envision being the first part of the journey as part of the commission.
Yes, Ms. Young.
Thank you very much. For me, the biggest issue is change and transition. The county that we're living in today is not the county we were living in a couple years ago when I first moved here. And I didn't really see that well translated within the Charter Commission. And if I'm to be elected, it's going to take a lot of work, of course, a lot of research. But I think that with the change, there's more diversity within our county. The population is a little bit more different. There's changes within the economy, and there's just a lot of work to do within the Charter Commission to translate that and welcome different perspectives.
Yes, Mr. Hill.
It's to my mind, it's hard to say what the biggest challenges are facing the commission. As I understand it, the issues are brought to the commission in the first instance from other parties. So without that input, it'd be hard to say. But I did spend some time with the last commission report and looking at the charter. And the notion, as was stated by Mr. Lauer, that it's a living, breathing, viable document, I think is the critical piece. As you all know better than most, if not anybody, we're in a place where we've got increasingly two counties, and that's creates myriad challenges before you, and I think those would come, I'm sure you would have issues that you would want to bring to us. I'm sure the public would have issues that they'd want to bring to us. So the issue of transparency and responsiveness to those concerns would be I think, the single biggest challenge facing the commission.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Lauer.
There were a number of issues that we discussed last year that we resolved some of the questions. One of the biggest ones I think last year was the issue of 9 votes to pass any budget above any taxes above the rate of inflation. If a member was absent, you couldn't do anything, and we passed an amendment. And I think that might have to be reviewed a little bit more, because I think there may be possibilities that someone could be disabled to still be in office, and I'm not sure that it's clear about that. Those were issues that were brought to us by other people that we looked at and determined. I thought that was but I think that issue deserves to be looked at. I think some of the things regarding the redistricting next year. Well, see, every 10 years there's a redistricting process. That would be 22, I guess. And so we changed last year and it was approved by the voters, the way the redistricting council is selected. But I think that we haven't had a change in the council membership since like 1990. And at that time, we had like 750,000 people in the county. We now have well over 1 million, and it's spread well outside of the Beltway now. And I think that there are communities on the eastern side of the county, in the center county where I'm from, Maloney, and I know that there are people there feel that, and also in the western county feel that they don't have a good, the people that are on the council don't have a good feel about the needs in their communities. And I think some of those communities feel somewhat left out. And I think it would be interesting for the council, for the CRC to look at that redistricting issue prior to the census and prior to having the redistricting drawn, the districts drawn. So I think those are some of the pressing issues that I think would need to be looked at by the CRC.
All right, the third question is, the commission serves a 4-year term. The commission will determine its schedule once it convenes. But in the past, the commission has met on a monthly basis, generally at 8 a.m. Will you be able to make the time commitment that the commission requires?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, I will.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. The chair of the commission will be appointed by the council. Would you be able to serve in that role if asked?
Yes.
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 I'm a little qualified for that. I'm not sure that I would like to be chair.
Okay, thank you. Are there any potential conflicts of interest of which we should be aware?
No. No.
No.
No.
All right, thank you. Okay, I do see a light. Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you for volunteering to serve, and you've got very strong applications. Really appreciate your interest. Wanted to just ask a general question. As Montgomery County gets bigger and bigger, more and more people here, I feel like there's a growing tension or problem with the ballot initiative process that enables changes to the charter amendment process. And, for example, with taxing authority, I think the intent of the charter is for the elected representatives to have the obligation, the responsibility of making the budget. But there have been ballot questions that have removed council's authority, and there's more that could come in the future. I'm interested in, I grew up in California, and in California, the initiative process was just, it was a perversion of democracy, and it still is today. It's something that lends itself to, the just manipulation. And I don't think it's healthy or really produces good outcomes. But we're sort of, so I wanted to just ask you, philosophically, any comments on this issue of the ability that people have to put questions on the ballot. And, I know it sounds like it's the most democratic, but I think in practice it is really substantially the least democratic type of process. But you don't have, if you care to comment, you may. If not, I won't hold it against you. Mr. Lauer.
Again, I've lived in Montgomery County all my life. I was born in Tacoma Park in 1949. I've lived in Albany since 1958. So I've been, I've seen a lot of changes in the county. And my opinion is that I've seen those measures both succeed and fail. And I think if you look at the way the voters responded to those things, I think if they were not popular and not good, and the voters voted them would vote them down. But I think there is a need for a safety valve that the populace can have, and I think that the amendment process that we're talking about is that safety valve. So it tends to. I know many of the council members from the last council were unhappy with the passing of the term limit. But it received a very popular vote, a very overwhelming vote. So I mean, you have to say that it was approved by the voters, and I don't think anybody from the council or probably even the CRC would have recommended something like that. But I think that it serves a purpose, and I would not be in favor of eliminating it. Now, if you say you think it might be too easy because there's so many voters, and you have to have a very low threshold of signed. That may be something that could be looked at, but I would not at all favor eliminating it or making it impossible for those things to happen.
Thank you. I don't have a specific proposal or provision. I'm worried that we're heading in the direction of California, and it's not a good direction to go. Mr. Hill.
I associate myself with many of the remarks that Mr. Lauer just gave. I guess I want to emphasize that Montgomery, I think this county's special. This county, we've got a large number of very educated members in our citizenry. So I kind of think there's almost a need for that safety valve, as was referenced. And if there's going to be controversy or even, I'll use this term, it's not the way I look at it, but attack on the council's power, I think it would be a very well debated and well discussed effort that in this county, we'd probably be able to find a way through it, notwithstanding all the changes that everybody's talking about. So I guess I start from the place of faith in the citizenry to, on the right issues, come out and discuss it. Term limits, you can go either way. I think I'm pretty happy, and I'm not trying to blatantly kiss up, but I'm pretty happy with the results that we got as a result of term limits. So that, in my own personal opinion. So, and I think there was a lot of back and forth, but the result ended up good, and I think that's an example of the way this county would work in the main. Although I can see, especially coming from California, Councilmember Reamer, that you could see the danger in sliding that direction.
I was really more focused on the fiscal issues. I think that is something that really was intended to be managed by the county council, and it's a concern. But we don't, not for a lengthy discussion. Thank you.
I would just interject myself and say that, like everything, especially this year as we're working on our racial equity and social justice policies, it is interesting because the experience and the perspective of a very well-educated voter or somebody who is of a higher socioeconomic status is very different from a maybe low income or immigrant or people of color that perhaps do not have the opportunity to go through and analyze a lot of these proposals. And I personally have had some interesting experiences with some of those proposals and the way that the language was put forth, and trying to explain that to this, this very diverse community, which, by the way, 4 of the 5 councilmanic districts in the county are majority people of color, and 30% are immigrants. It begs the question of exactly what is it that we're doing? But it is true, this is a larger conversation that we need to have, and I think it speaks to this issue of change and who is really, participating, and who are the members of a commission like this one, and how do we do the appropriate outreach so that we are not thinking that we are really hearing from the public when the public may not be from all of the different sectors of the community. So it is a broader issue for the county, I think, and that we're all trying to work through, and I'm sure we'll, but, I think each of you has really put a pin, and really touched upon some very important aspects. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Council President. And just to continue along that line, while I'm beneficiary of a amendment to our a change in how we elect our officials, and I appreciate the sucking up, Mr. Hill, as do my colleagues that are new here, I'm sure. I share the concern that certain communities, squeaky wheels get the oil, and that is true here in Montgomery County. When I ran, and my involvement with the county and politics in general has always been about how do we expand the amount of voices and people who are engaged in their democracy. And I know each of you have mentioned that in different ways. And so I think as we review the charter, we need to think about that. And who are we today? Who's not being heard? What voices are elevated? What are the structural mechanisms that get in the way of that? I agree with Mr. Reamer. You go to California, you don't know what any of these propositions mean. And you just get the moneyed interests that pay for the best ad, and that's who wins. And often those people are the people who don't have the best interests of regular folk in mind. And so I think we need to think about that as we evaluate this next round, because while I was the beneficiary this time, we worked very hard, and I think public financing was an example where it emphasized and allowed opportunity to engage more people, and it incentivized that as a candidate. But it's not perfect. We're going to make tweaks, but I worry about empowering special interests in such a way. And the way our current ballot process to put something on the ballot functions, I think, even if it's a good idea, it can benefit someone who's really focused and has a lot of money and works very hard, and not necessarily benefit everybody. So I just, you can comment on that if you want, but I did have a specific question about county government experience. And I know Mr. Hill, I know you've served. Maybe anyone can comment on this, but can you talk specifically about your knowledge of how the county government operates, and how you're going to bring that to this role if appointed?
Sure. Thank you, Councilmember Jawando. I'll go first. It's going to be short. I don't have any experience in the county government. I've reviewed the charter, reviewed other documents as my preparation for this interview, but in terms of working for the county government, I don't have any experience.
Not necessarily working, just interacting in any way.
Interacting with the county government in any way, no, not necessarily.
No,
no.
this would be your first. Okay.
Correct.
Not required for the post, but I'm just curious to know. Yes, ma'am?
I also have no experience with the county council, and I haven't worked or had any personal experience with it. I've just, like Mr. Christopher, reviewed the Charter Commission. I've only been involved on a county level in terms of campaigns, getting people from my community involved, knowledgeable on, elections. And to touch on the previous question, I helped a lot of people from my community learn about elections because they only care about presidential elections. So I sort of talked to them about the importance of local elections. So a lot of people did come out to vote, and when they went out to vote, they asked me, who should I vote for? Send me a list. But when it came to those amendments, they had no idea what it meant, So I really care about educating them, and not just for them to show up and vote, but to also understanding what they're voting for, what kind of policy that they're implementing in the county that's going to affect their lives, their families, and the future. So, but in terms of county council, I have not had any experience.
Well, you actually have. You just explained the way in which you were engaged with county government. That's a critically important way, but I appreciate your modesty, so thank you.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Hill?
Not knowing what any of your experiences may have been with this experience, with this particular experience I have had, I will put it out there anyway. When Verizon was trying to build out its FiOS network in the county, I was the general counsel for the company in the state of Maryland and did in fact interact with the council in that role at that time. Prior council, I think maybe even before your time. So I'm getting up there to the point where I can't even place it exactly how many years ago it was, but it was early part of 2000, the aughts. So that is my lone experience directly with county government.
Thank you.
Well, my experience with the county goes back from being a high school student in Montgomery County at Sherwood, 1974 graduate. No, I'm sorry, 1968 graduate. We just did our 50th year reunion, and I forgot. Anyway, and then putting my own kids through school, 4 of them, and then of course being a property owner, you know, and raising 4 kids in the county, and you know, those were things that interested me in getting involved. Now that I've retired and have more time to be involved, and I was on the Right to Vote Commission and the CRC and other things like this, and so it's a very rewarding activity to be. I'm also an election judge, so I really like being there in the community. I think it's a very community feel to our elections, and I like to keep it that way. Anyway, I've just had a lot of experiences besides those things that are on my resume.
Thank you. And thank you, Madam President.
Councilmember Rice.
So I guess a comment and a question, and the comment is, you know, that I've heard a lot about mentioned about voters and voters' will and their voice. I just want to remind folks that in 2014, our voter turnout was 22%, and last year was at a high of 29%, so less than a third. So we have to be very cautious, especially folks who are on our Charter Review Commission, about talking about that being the true will of the people, understanding that these are of eligible voters. These aren't of our general population. These are of eligible voters who came out to vote. And then it's a majority of that small percentage of our eligible voters who made that. So that's not really some sort of a landmark land sweep in terms of, oh my gosh, the majority of Montgomery County felt a certain way, which goes to one of the comments before. But Mr. Lauer, something that you said in terms of redistricting, and certainly the council president touched on this earlier about how it is that we are trying to look at things with an equity lens. And so I'm very curious. I represent the most conservative district in the county, the up-county region, and certainly some of my colleagues would assert that I'm probably one of the more conservative members of the council as well. What do you think needs to change about the districts here in the county in terms of equity? Because you had mentioned about redistricting, so I'm just curious as to your thoughts.
Well, last year when the CRC held a number of public forums, and in those public forums, we heard from many people that they felt that they could not get any representation on the issues in their local areas. And that's what drove us to look at this issue. It wasn't necessarily driven by equity issues, but if you look at it from a kind of a holistic point of view, when in 1990, as I said, the council members we went to this 5 council districts and 4 at-large members, and the council districts at that time was roughly about 120,000, and now they're over 220,000 people per each district. And there's enclaves of people in the northern county up there. There's groups that feel alienated. I know in Alany, when I go to the GOCA meetings and things, they say we've never had a council member from Alany or the Brookville, Sandy Spring area, and the same way with over in the eastern county. I think over towards the 29 area, that there's enclaves of people over there that don't feel that they get the service that they need from. And I think that it's just a good time to examine that. I mean, it's been since 1990 when we first did it. I mean, when this council size was created, I think it's time to take a serious look at that and see if increasing the number of council members. Some people don't like the at-large members. I personally think the at-large members play a good role, but I would increase these individual districts without decreasing the number of the at-large people myself. But it would be, I'm not going to dictate this. It's a matter of understanding where we are and what would be the nicest, the best way to get equal representation and a feeling that the citizens feel that they're represented.
Mr. Hill, did you want to respond?
I did. Thank you, Councilmember Rice. I think it was in the 2018 commission that Mr. Lauer served on, there was a minority, there was a reporting on this issue. And I think that one point that was made in that report was too soon to judge on redistricting, on changing the council member composition because we've just gotten the term limits was out there and what the impact might look like. And again, you all are the impact of that. But in thinking about this, is it, and I do think it's an issue that the next CRC should look at and continue to look at. I also think it's an issue where people are very interested, but then it's back to which people are interested and what changes we make are truly representative of the entirety as opposed to the microcosm of people who show up at these small meetings. So I certainly would hope that the next CRC would look at the issue, find ways to be equitable and getting the input before making any kinds of decisions.
Did either one of you want to comment on that?
This is, I agree with Mr. Hill. I think it's something that looks to be an important issue that the past commission reviewed, and it's something that the next commission will have to dig into and really inform themselves as to if anything can be done about it.
Mr. Hill, and thank you, Mr. Danley. Mr. Hill, you certainly hit the nail on the head because the problem is that I can assure you that those public forums that you had, no disrespect, didn't look like the community. I know because when I hold my own community meetings in the areas, they don't look like the community. The folks who we want to come out to these don't come out. And so you really, unless you're partnering with agencies like CASA, like Identity, like NAACP, unless you're partnering with our school system to try and go into those communities, you're not getting the true voice of the community. And yes, you're getting some of those folks who may be out there, but you're missing the majority. It's that same 22 or 29% that I talked about before, and then it's the 60% of those. That's who you're getting. You're not getting the majority of our residents. And so if you're going to be on this commission and if you're going to be tackling issues like this, I will caution you that it's incredibly important for you to make sure that you are reaching into the communities, the work that you've done, Ms. Chevo, in terms of getting out there and talking to folks who we know aren't participatory, because those folks aren't the ones who are raising their hands and saying, hey, I'm not feeling as though my issue's being heard, and their issue is just as important as that person who did come out to that meeting. And so we in Montgomery County have to do a better job of that. And so while I certainly support taking a look at these things, so I don't have an issue with that, I want to make sure that when we do, as a charter commission, that we're actually making sure we're hearing from all voices. And I can certainly offer my help in partnering with whoever does get appointed to this commission. I encourage you to work with district council members who do this work, who are out there and engaged and have the contacts in the community to make sure that everybody's voice is heard. And then I think we'll have a much better process as a result. So thank you, Madam President.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate everybody's participation, and we're going to proceed with our second panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And for our second panel, we have Mr. George Margolis, Perry Paylor, Nicole Thomas, and Courtney Walker. So good to see you. Good afternoon. So as we did with the first panel, we have a series of prepared questions, and then we'll open it up to any exchange for any other questions or comments that my colleagues might have. So we're going to start. The first question is briefly discuss why you are interested in serving on the Charter Review Commission and explain what in your background will assist you in this role. And we'll start with Ms. Walker.
Hi, good afternoon.
Can you please, there's a button there. Yeah.
Good afternoon, Madam President. Thank you so much, everybody, for your time. We appreciate this opportunity. I'm very much interested in serving in local government. I'm not sure if you've seen my resume, but I have an extensive experience working at the federal level with the executive as well as the legislative branch. I am a two-year, coming up on 2 years as a new resident in Montgomery County, coming from Howard County. My husband and I have decided to make Montgomery County our home, as well as getting involved into local government. So my background in terms of leveraging diversity, managing a lot of priorities, a lot of management opportunities at the federal level as well as at the state level, but really looking forward to spending time in my community. More specifically, we're about to embark on being first-time parents ourselves. And so for that, we chose specifically to reside in Montgomery County. I'm looking forward to really leveraging my background, working at the legislative and executive level to really harness my experience and make a difference in the community.
Thank you so much. Ms. Thomas.
Thank you for this opportunity to interview for this position. My interest is in contributing to the responsiveness of county government to the needs of all county citizens. Historically, I have been apolitical. With the events of the previous presidential election, I had all sorts of emotions and feelings and said, well, if I'm unhappy, maybe I need to be involved and be more engaged. So I began the process of looking for opportunities for civic engagement in my community. When I saw this announcement, I went to look at the work of the commission, specifically examining the research reports, and some of the findings and recommendations were of interest to me. And so here I am. My experience that I believe is relevant is my work as a higher education professional, research scientist and psychologist, specifically listening to the concerns of individuals and groups, facilitating group discussions and writing research reports, I think would be helpful to the work of the commission.
Thank you. Mr. Baylor.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to apply for the commission. I was born and raised in Silver Spring, Maryland. I'm a graduate of Paint Branch High School, and I have a passion to serve, and I'm committed to improving Montgomery County. I currently sit on the board of PIC-MC, their real estate commission, the Pinckney Innovation Complex of Montgomery County. I served previously 8 years, 2 terms on the Juvenile Justice Commission. And with my fraternity, I'm the chair of the Community Outreach Commission, where we volunteer with Wider Circle of the Lincoln Park Community Center, and also we provide services to William Tyler Page Elementary School. Professionally, I'm a licensed attorney in Maryland for over 20 years, and I've served as bond counsel to a neighboring county where I've had the opportunity to work with the issuance of public debt. In that capacity, I've had the opportunity to analyze local, state, and federal legislation. So I think I can bring my commitment to service with my professional experience to benefit the commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Margolis.
Madam President, having retired recently after decades of public service engaged in public policy, I hope and I believe I can contribute not only my professional experiences, but also my civic experiences here in Montgomery County. I've worked in several other charter counties and jurisdictions here in the state, Anne Arundel, Prince George's County, and Baltimore City, in which I had to address personnel, budget and finance matters shaped by their charters, and I spent 11 years here as staff director, now chief of staff of the Board of Education. However, to address Councilmember Jawando's question as far as familiarity with the agency of Montgomery County, government as framed by the charter, from varying perspectives. I have had both civic and consultant hats here that I've worn over the years. These range from my chairmanship of the Commission on Children and Youth to my serving as facilitator for numerous retreats and meetings of the ICB, to serving as special personnel investigator for the Merit System Protection Board, to being an ad hoc fact finder for the Office of Personnel, to serving as an ad hoc arbitrator for the then Office of Consumer Affairs, to being on the executive board of the Collaboration Council and Interages, and even chairing the committee for Montgomery in its formative years, among other service. When I learned of this opportunity to serve on the Charter Review Commission, it seemed like a perfect melding of my experiences with my legal background, where I hope I can help address significant issues in need of solution. I enjoy researching, I enjoy writing, and most importantly, I take delight in resolving seemingly intractable matters through compromise, perhaps as a result of my earlier career in labor relations and labor law. I therefore earnestly thank you for this opportunity to serve the County Council and the County Executive after having lived here for 45 years. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Okay, the second question is, what do you see as the most important issues facing the Commission? Ms. Walker.
Thank you again for the question. I see a variety of issues facing the county. I've only been here for 2 years, but I can tell you that from my perspective, diversity and inclusivity specifically, I see our challenges. I think the transparency, the education of what it is that we want to advance. I think I connect with many of the comments raised previously, but I can tell you that as a new resident of this county, there are a lot of activities that I am not aware of, and if it weren't for my desire to want to do more research and understand what it is exactly the role that you all serve for the residents of Montgomery County. But I can see, for one, the education, transparency, and really getting the word out with what's important in the agenda that you want to advance to your residents, I see are some of the challenges facing the county from my perspective as a new resident.
Ms. Thomas?
Thank you. I can't say for certain what the most important issues facing the commission are, but after reviewing the reports of the commission from previous years, my perception was that 3 issues, specifically composition of the county council, representation of up-county and East County communities, and at-large versus single-member districts. There were a lot of interesting proposals I saw where the numbers changed over time with respect to votes. I was particularly struck by the fact that the number of residents has increased from about 750,000 to over 1.1 million. And getting to what you're saying, Councilmember Rice, I didn't see compelling evidence that some of the concerns addressed about meeting the needs of those residents in East County and Up County areas, that those were adequately addressed. I just simply saw arguments, well, we haven't heard that people are unhappy from a lot of people there, so therefore things must be working well. So my perception, again, I can't say for sure what's most important, but that seemed like important. Like it's very important with respect to equity, making sure that people who don't always get involved for some of the reasons that you mentioned, they don't have time, they don't have the opportunity, maybe all sorts of reasons they're not involved, but that their needs are still important and they need to be met. And so I'm wondering, I haven't arrived at a conclusion, but whether those needs are being met. And I think work should be done with gathering some evidence about how people feel, not just sort of, well, let's look at the 22% or 29% of people who show up, but let's actually find out from a scientific perspective what we can about the experiences, attitudes, and perceptions of our residents and the plurality of our residents.
Thank you. Mr. Paylor?
Yes.
Okay, please press the button at the base there.
Yes, the 2 areas that I would say the commission would focus would be sections 104, the redistricting issue. We discussed that at length. But also, I would take a look at Section 110, your zoning issues. As the community expands, as we get more diverse as a community, our workforce becomes more diverse, but our work day and the kind of professional opportunities that are offered will change. And we need to make sure that we are providing opportunities for people to make a living. Also, we'll see sprawl, right? So between Silver Spring and Wheaton, what used to be suburban living now is going to become more rural. We're going to have affordable housing. We're going to have multifamily housing. And so we're going to have to be able to make sure that our zoning process is fair to everyone that's engaged in the process.
Mr. Margolis.
I'm somewhat reluctant at this point to state what I think should be the issues facing the commission, because I think it should be a collective decision of the commission. I don't come here with an agenda. I think the commission's approach, the new commission's approach, should be somewhat multifaceted, where first we should meet with the outgoing commission, as I think that commission itself even suggested. We should then meet with the individual members of the council and the county executive or his representative to get views as to ambiguities and concerns as to the charter itself. And I think we ought to meet with the CAO in his role as the chair of the transition team to discuss any issues relating to the charter that may have arisen during their deliberations, and the 222 members of the transition team, which is sort of mind-boggling that it was that large. But that's not to suggest I would enter upon my responsibilities as a blank slate, because I have given some thought to the various provisions, but I wouldn't necessarily be pushing it as being my agenda. So I was looking at things such as Section 107 of the charter involving compensation of the council members, in which whether or not a thought ought to be given as to whether taking the vote out of the hands of the council members and considering whether tying compensation to either COLAs or the average compensation of employees, or Section 203, and whether the county executive candidates should be residents of this county for more than just 1 year. Section 108, which has been considered by the Charter Commission in the past, whether to revisit rotating the county council presidency, whether to change that from rotation every year to electing the council president to a 4-year term. And Section 109, which seems almost innocuous, but I couldn't figure out why Section 109 limits the maximum number of legislative days and why it's written into the charter as opposed to into legislation. It just seems like a strange provision. I'm not sure that voters of the county really care about it, but it just seems like a strange provision in the county charter.
It is.
And what Councilmember Rice spoke to, the referendum threshold of, I guess it's 5%, to put something at least to referendum, and whether that's way too low. So, I mean, like I say, I don't come to the Charter Commission where I to be appointed as a blank slate, but at the same time, I really think it's for the commission to really push an agenda, not me. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. The commission serves a 4-year term. The commission will determine its schedule once it convenes, but in the past, the commission has met on a monthly basis, generally at 8 a.m. Will you be able to make the time commitment that the commission requires?
Yes.
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 The chair of the commission will be appointed by the council. Will you be able to serve in that role if asked?
If asked, yes.
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 Hadn't really given any thought to this, but as you can see from my resume, I haven't shirked from leadership positions in my past. My only concern would be whether or not it's in order to commitment of time beyond the monthly meetings and subcommittee meetings, but qualified, yes.
Wonderful. Are there any potential conflicts of interest of which we should be aware?
There are none.
No.
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 Wonderful. All right, we have some lights as well. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Council President, and thank you all for your willingness to serve. It's good to see some fresh mix of people who, gluttons for punishment like Mr. Margolis, and people who have just moved to the county and are willing to get engaged. I think you get the best outcome when you have a good mix. So couple questions directly to, first, Mr. Paler, good to see you. You mentioned section, if I wrote it down, you mentioned 110, which talks about the authority for land use and zoning, which the council has by charter, and which I'm on that committee, the Fed committee, which considers that first before the full council. And I just want to allow you the opportunity to clarify, do you have a view on changing where that authority sits, or just to expand on that point? I just want to understand that a little more.
No, I would really just say that the commission should just study the effectiveness of the process and to make sure that it's fair and everyone has the opportunity to engage in the zoning process. Because I know in other areas sometimes there's not a lot of transparency involved in zoning. So that's what I would like to make sure that process is fair and that it's transparent.
Got it. Thank you. And Mr. Margolis, so how have you had the opportunity to be on, you said Anne Arundel? How many counties? I missed all of
I
them.
promise you I could hold a job. When I left Montgomery County after 11 years with the board, I went down to Arundel as chief of staff for 7 years, I think. Then I went to Prince George's County as chief of staff. Before I was in Montgomery County, I was with Baltimore City as assistant superintendent.
And you were there at each time when there was charter review processes happening. So you.
Well,
you were
yeah,
kind
I don't
of
know. There was actually a charter review process in
Okay.
Baltimore City at the time, and then I was in D.C. as legal counsel to the superintendent there for 13 years.
Yeah, well, that's great.
I know I look young. No, no.
That's great experience. And then just my other question, I know you, especially to our newest residents and the county familiarity, what do you think, in addition to diversity and inclusion, in your review, and you spoke to this a little bit, in your review of the charter and the previous questions that were considered by the current commission, I just want to press a little harder on what you think are some things that we need to consider, the commission needs to consider. Is there any specific proposals that you thought of, or anything that you said, that really needs, that was a good idea, or this needs to be considered more, discussed more? I really liked your point about using data for the 80% of people who aren't involved, so I just want to give you a chance to expound on that a little bit.
I don't have a proposal for specifically a research designed to obtain the information that I noted, although that's something that certainly could be discussed and developed. But as to your part of your question, my perception was that the recommendations of the 2006 commission were particularly interesting. And as I recall, there were two proposals, and both proposals did not focus on getting rid of the at-large positions, but simply increasing the number of positions, although the numbers were different for the proposals. And so, given that this issue has been revisited so many times by the commission, and that the vote has changed, like with higher and lower numbers over the years, and that the last time there was a change was 30 years ago, and that the county has had changing demographics, it seems like more work could be done in that area to ensure that we're not only hearing from the county executive, from the county council, but from members of the public in those communities that have historically been underrepresented in public discussion of this and other issues, other important issues as well.
Thank you. Ms. Walker, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think for me, there's not a specific proposal per se, but really just getting at the heart of what she just mentioned as well, is just making sure that there's just inclusivity in the discussions and in the decisions going forward. I think it was mentioned earlier as well that, you know, we're living in a different changing times. We have to think about the needs of our community in the future, and not so much of where we've been, but where we'd like to go. So to the extent that we can at least be open-minded and hear from the community and try to leverage the feedback from them in our process and in our decision-making, will really advance us and position us well for where we'd like to go in the future. So
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Madam President.
Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you for applying and offering your service. Lest you think that by not asking the same questions again, I in some way don't think you're also fantastic. You were here for that previous dialogue. I think you've had a chance to kind of mull over those issues. I think the specific issue of the thresholds is a good one to take a look at. But we don't need to belabor that. You've been here for this, and I feel you've participated. So thank you very much for offering your service. I really appreciate it.
I don't see any more lights. I'd just like to take a point of personal privilege and thank Mr. Margolis for stepping up here. Mr. Margolis was essential in really giving a lot of support to this 38-year-old that ran for an appointment at the Board of Education. I had no idea what in the world was going on, and he was there as Chief of Staff to the Board of Education and was very patient, and as he, helped me get through all of this, and here we are. So thank you for stepping up after your retirement to apply for this particular commission. Really appreciate everything you have done over the years for the county and for other areas of the state. And thank all of you as well. It is very refreshing to see some new faces and people who are so interested in stepping up. I was also one of those, very young moms that chose Montgomery County precisely for that reason. And it is really wonderful because it is a county where, this kind of involvement is really valued, and we always seek to have opportunities like these for everyone. So thank you so much, and we will be we'll be in touch shortly with our selection. Appreciate it. Thank you.